report. And we can look at just fund balance. So if you go, I think if it's in the printed packet, you'll go back a page to the fund balance summary.
Back a page from this report.
Yes, so it's the one that looks like this. With the,
2 blue columns.
with the columns on it.
Yep.
And this is a detailed by fund balance projected.
This is just for the calendar year.
This is
Just
for
one
the
year.
fiscal year,
Fiscal year.
just for fiscal year 21.
So we don't have-
Yep, should be, 2 pages. The unassigned fund balance, we added about 1.5 million. To the reserve accounts, we added about 386,000 for the general fund. And as you go down, you can see the food service fund, we added about 160,000. Community ed, with all of their fund balances combined, was about 124,000.
To the
To
good.
the good, everybody's to the good.
And how does this, those new numbers, well, maybe you have them coming up here, I apologize. We're gonna talk about, down the road, talking
I
about,
haven't put them into that yet because they are still considered unaudited numbers.
gotcha.
We are hoping to wrap up our audit, get everything submitted to the auditors they need by the end of this week, get any questions answered they need by the end of this week, so that by our next finance committee meeting, we're looking at financial statements.
Good.
And then we can look at projections as well. All right, so that was just a preview of the results. We're hoping to come out in our audit, or we're, at this point, we're pretty sure are gonna come out in our audit. There have not been many questions on the estimates or anything that has been used for the audit. The other 2 reports there are just some summaries and graphs of the general fund, if you wanna take a look at it in a different way. Is next, are there any questions on how last year is closing up?
Not right now, maybe if they come up down the road with the
Okay.
audit, we'll maybe ask.
The next item on the agenda is our enrollment update. We have 1 month of data here for September. And it looks, as of, I believe, what was the date on this? Early last week, like September 22nd, we had 2,548 students. And just with 1 month of data, we are 0.14 weighted ADM above budget.
About what?
Above budget, so.
That includes the online kids in Three Rivers, those,
That would include those kids as well. We're playing it conservative with those students right now, and using the tuition out numbers from last year, so that's where they would show up, is in that tuition outline.
Right.
So when we start doing March submissions for fall, we'll get a better handle on what that tuition out number is, which would include the Five Rivers students and the Tower View students. Any questions?
Last year at this time, how many students?
If you look at about midway down the page in kind of the tan, there's a prior year 10-1.
Is that it?
That's it.
2,526?
Yep.
So it's possible, by these numbers, we're up 20 students?
Possible.
Well, I think
Just
that's
know
a
as
positive.
of 9/22 though, we still had not hit the 15-day drop,
Okay,
which is, I think hits today, is 15-day drop.
so we'll
We might have,
a little bit more realistic numbers in
I
our
saw 15-day drop, got
October
it, yep,
finance meeting.
okay. I don't have any additional questions on the enrollment, do you, Jim?
No, just we'll study it, keep our eye on it like we always do, see, hopefully it holds.
all right, I can pull up the levy analysis.
Okay.
see if you guys have any questions, but it has not changed from what I presented at the board last week. MBE has not posted any updates. Are there any questions?
Refresh my memory, I wasn't at the board meeting last time.
Correct.
And I don't recall what I read about it, so. And are we down?
Our levy will be down 3.66%, mostly due to our enrollment being down. A lot of the formulas run on enrollment. In the general fund there, expanded it too far, now I can't see it. The ones especially you see are down are referendum, local optional revenue, operating capital. Those ones all run on pupil unit numbers. So they're down based on our down projections now, and then they're catching up now from 2 years ago so what we levied for last school year, at the time of the levy, we were anticipating a different enrollment number than came out in the wash. We have to, that's about 15 months before the school year is when that runs. So there's some adjustments, downward adjustments for that as well. The down in the debt service or debt redemption fund is a reduction for debt excess. Our fund balance, we have to levy 100%, 110% of our payments that are due. So the fund balance builds up, and when it gets to a certain point, they'll refund it back to the taxpayers, and that's what's happening here. Any
How
other?
do they refund it back to taxpayers? People here.
They just get a reduction on the levy like they're doing here. So it'll reduce the amount we levy for this upcoming year.
Government doesn't give back money very often,
Right, so no checks are in the mail.
No.
just a reduction.
It's a paper entry.
But that could all change too, based upon your market value of your property. If it changes significantly, your percentage of payment for taxes goes up, and we could go on and bore you to death for another 2 hours.
No, you're
Talking
good,
about
you're
taxes.
good. I read the statements as they come and I go, I don't know what this means, but okay.
Any other questions on the preliminary tax levy? All right. Our truth and taxation meeting is set, as always, for the first meeting in December. And then we usually approve the levy at the second meeting in December. All right, I'm actually gonna open it up in slideshow because it's gonna be easier. The next two things have to do with questions that have come up on DCED and how the program works, how Five Rivers is gonna work. I'm gonna start with the generic, how does the funding flow to DCED for their programs? And then we'll talk about Five Rivers online specifically.
Did the numbers go down
No,
from what we discussed last Thursday on enrollment, or is that what it was?
that's what it was.
For some reason I was thinking 180, but it's 160.
It's dependent upon whether you include just full-time or full-time and part-time.
Okay,
And for the simplicity in my reports, I use just full-time.
okay.
So the formula for determining average daily membership, as we looked at our enrollment report, is the residents served in the district plus residents served elsewhere in tuition agreements, which would be anything at DCED, but it could also be they're being served at intermediate 287 or intermediate 917. Majority of ours, though, are at DCED. Plus open enrollment served in the district is how we get to total ADM for our state aid and referendum. So just keep that in the back of your head while I'm talking. So the funding for the programs, all the DCED programs are tuition-based. DCED, the way they are set up as an entity with the state of Minnesota, cannot directly receive general education revenue or referendum revenue or any of that. That's just how they're set up with the state. They are tuition-based provider. So GCED reports the students in their MARS. All the revenue flows to the district of residence. So when GCED reports a Red Wing student in Mars, they report they're being served by GCED, but that their resident district is Red Wing. So then Red Wing gets the revenue. Then we will pay a tuition bill to GCED for the services. So these are the programs currently hosted by GCED. REACH, which is their Setting 4 program. A Pathways 6-7, which is our mid-level ALC program. We have 2 high school programs hosted there, Pathways 8-12 and Tower View. All of the county's targeted services, which is before and after school programming for elementary kids, is under their umbrella. Credit recovery services, which is before or after school and summer programming for high school age students, and now 5 Rivers Online. So in the last 3 years, this is the Red Wing residents that were enrolled in their program. So we've typically had around 30 students in the Setting 4 program, 3 or 4 students in the mid-level Pathways program. Well, I'm gonna not say that. Mid-level Pathways is a half-day program. So it could be where it says 4 ADM here, it was probably 8 students with a half-day program. The other half is claimed in their member district. You can see the Tower View and high school Pathways program, and then credit recovery services. The 2021 numbers, we are still working on getting ADM numbers for credit recovery and targeted services. They did run, they just have not been calculated yet by the Department of Ed.
So this is the fiscal year 2021.
These are correct.
So we would know what the numbers are, they just haven't been.
Reported.
That takes over 3 months to get them up with that, try them, or up to 3 months now.
Yeah, we won't have final 2021 ADM numbers from the Department of Ed until February.
And it's almost 4 months, because school's been out since early June.
Right.
Kids didn't go.
So REACH is their Setting 4 program. The tuition is calculated by the Minnesota Department of Education based on data we enter into their special ed expenditure reporting system. Tuition payments to GCED for students attending REACH are subtracted from our special education aid. So we never pay a paper check to GCED for the special education services. It's just a line item on our special ed aid calculation. So here's the tuition expense Red Wing has paid GCED over the last 3 years, and the average per ADM. So with this, it also pulls the general education revenue associated with these students to GCED for their programming. And then the tuition expense is what is above and beyond cost for that program to run. And when I say average per ADM, some students may be higher, some students may be lower, just based on the services they're receiving. So all of our state-approved alternative programs are for at-risk youth. They're listed there. They're the 2 Pathways programs, Tower View, and then those before and after school and summer programs, targeted services and credit recovery. For these programs, we send a paper invoice to the district of residence for the students served. The expenses for the program are split by ADM in that program. We'll talk a little bit more about that on the next page when I have some numbers in there. The revenue for the program is transferred to the district hosting the program. So for example, if a Cannon Falls student attends Tower View, GCED will bill Cannon Falls that per ADM fee and issue a credit to Red Wing, so that the Cannon Falls tuition flows to Red Wing to cover the expenses. It's almost like drawing a map. So if all Red Wing kids attended, Red Wing would have got all of the revenue the gen ed revenue would have flowed to Red Wing and there would have been no tuition billing needed.
Okay.
But if a Cannon Falls resident or a Kenny Notamingo resident attends, then we need to get that revenue back from them to Red Wing. So here is the alternative education programs cost per student for the last 3 years. The alt ed calculations for 2021 are not available yet because we're still waiting on the ADM calculations for some programs. And I'm still, so we'll work through that, but you can see, so if a Cannon Falls resident attended Tower View in 1920, I would have billed them $7,798. Or GCED would have billed them that, and then they would have credited it back to Red Wing.
And
Karsten,
Yeah, I noticed that the Red Wing targeted services for the fiscal year 18 is 9,200, about 5 times the amount for the next year. What was there something in particular for fiscal year 18?
I would have to look back. My guess is we did not reduce our expenditures, but we had low student enrollment that year.
Yeah, and we can check that out later and, report back to the board.
good question.
So for Five Rivers Online, we're going to do something very similar with the ADM calculation. GCED is going to record all the expenses for Five Rivers Online. We're going to determine how many students attended from each district, and then we're going to divide it out on a percentage.
Is that you do that, since you do?
Since I do their finance, it will be me doing it.
Finances for both of us?
Yes. At the year end, we'll determine a cost per student and then bill it to their resident districts. So if Red Wing has 80 of 141 students, and this was a week ago's numbers, they're still changing, we would be billed for 56.7% of the expenses.
And we have any say in the expenses, or is that all governed by?
It's governed by the GCED board, which Holly is our representative on.
They can bill whatever they want. Can we contest any of that billing?
We could discuss it with Sherry. I don't know.
I didn't say discuss, contest.
Yeah, I don't know if we can contest unless we can contest the student is not our resident.
So they can bill us whatever they want,
Yes,
basically.
yes.
That doesn't seem to be appropriate.
Isn't it the same as way it's always been for every other program?
Correct.
I'm not saying hasn't
Right,
been
no,
done
but-
before like that. I'm just saying, it's like, Yeah.
It's worth looking into from
Yeah.
some angles
well,
differently.
I'm just saying, it's just like anything else, government gets complacent and it's always good to look into, see how something operates, to see if you can operate it differently. It needs to be tweaked to some degree, good or bad. I'm not saying it's bad, it's just when somebody can just bill you whatever, there is that,
What are the checks and balances?
there is that, thing out there stating, are we paying for what we're getting? Are we paying a fair share instead of more than what we should be?
Yep, and Holly as our board rep to
I-
GCED has input on the budget.
Yeah, I know, I agree, I understand that. Well, each school gets
One rep, yep.
one rep, so you get one person, and then, if you lose, one or two of you decide to go a different way, it passes majority, and, I'm just saying, besides that, is there another way to be?
Is there another way to appeal something?
Well, just to look at, I'm not disputing anything in particular.
Right, I understand.
It's just like, is it something that at some point should be reviewed? I mean, I'm just arbitrarily saying, by example only.
Yeah.
You give we're gonna do 10% increase for benefits and or salaries for our staff. That could just, that's just passed on. And other schools may not be doing that. So I just think it doesn't mean that, yeah, checks and balances or however, I'm just bringing up the idea. I'm not stating there's anything wrong with it, but if it keeps going as the way it is, because it's always been like that.
That's why I was
Maybe tell us
wondering, is
more.
it different than what we have, what has happened in the past? It's not, it's set up as the same. Not to say that whatever questions the board has, the GCED board has, may not have come up because their boards may not have discussed something that's a question.
The other thing is they have no levying authority, but they have fiscal authority.
Yeah,
So in essence, they can tell you, you have to pay this, even though they have no way of approaching the state through the levying authority.
and this has been my $1 million question all along, Jim, is why are we always in the red and GCE, and I'm not saying crazy numbering, but they're never in the red. Right? This district, like Red Wing is continuously trying to put this money into this pot and this.
Because of how the tuition billing works, they're always gonna come out at or near zero for their program expenses.
Mhm. Which doesn't put their board the board I'm on, in as much stress, because
Do they have a fund balance?
what is the fund balance?
In numbers, I'm not sure, we're hovering around 10-11% there
10 to 11% of what?
of expenditures.
And what are the expenditures?
11 approaching 12 million.
So they have 12 million or 13 million in reserves.
No, that is their annual budget, so it's 10% of that. So it's about $1 million.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Okay.
Yeah, in their fund
I was gonna
balance
say,
I heard you
policy,
wrong.
there is a clause where if they hit 15%, we refund to the member district.
Okay.
So going into just Five Rivers, this is Holly, you'll recognize it, this is the presentation I gave to the GCED board on Thursday night.
Yep.
How does the funding work? Sorry, Chromebook again. So it works, like I just said, much like the alternative ed program. GCED will report the MARS, the aid will flow to the resident district, and GCED will bill a share of the expenses for each participating district based on enrollment. That's the current full-time enrollment breakdown by district.
I think that's where the 80 came from.
Could be.
Yeah, I was thinking 180, but it was 80 students from Red Wing that attend.
Current revenue projection using only the current formula, state formula allowance is 1,628 times the pupil units of 159.80, or just over $1 million in revenue is being generated in the members to fund this program. In addition, each resident district will also generate referendum revenue, local optional revenue, and any other state aid formula that used adjusted pupil unit as the base measure. Here's what we're projecting in expenses for the program right now. We have there's one principal, 3 K-6 teachers in multi-grade level classrooms, 2.64 secondary core teachers, and 0.87 specialists. For total staff expenses of $602,221. Other expenses we have are supplies and curriculum, which is $61,880. Tech devices, Edgenuity costs for the licenses and marketing of the program, making the total expense budget $699,701. If we divide that out by our pupil units again of 159.8, the cost per pupil unit is $4,378.61, meaning that of the general formula, $2,349.39 will remain in the resident district.
Should we talk about what we just passed?
I think it's on the last slide and then
Okay, then we'll
I'll
go from
touch on
there.
it.
Okay.
So why are we doing this together? So we ran through a scenario using Red Wing's enrollment since it's the largest, and ran some expense projections to see if Red Wing, in fact, if you had 80 students, could you run this on your own? So there were 25 elementary students and 55 secondary students for 91 pupil units. 91 pupil units would be $612,248. Expenses, I took it down one elementary teacher since now we have 25 students in elementary. But because of licensure, I did not see a way to reduce secondary core teachers or specialists. Subtotaling staff expenses of $537,318. Same curriculum expenses. We maybe could take curriculum down a little bit. Total expenses of $634,799. If this were the budget, there would be a loss of about $248 per pupil unit, just using the state general education revenue. Now, Red Wing receives referendum revenue and other revenues on these students as well. We could probably make it break even, but it would be tight.
And, okay, yeah, go, wait till the next slide.
So the non-monetary benefits of jointly doing it, we submitted one application instead of 6 separate applications. We utilized GCED staff to prepare the application for us. We did not use our own staff time to help prepare the application. We would have had 6 competing online schools just due to the proximity. So we would have been fighting with each other for students. And because it's under the GCED umbrella as a tuition-based program instead of an open enrollment program, students can still be connected to the resident district for after-school activities and some in-person classes.
So if it was open enrollment,
They would have to participate in the activities and athletics of their open enrolled district.
meaning,
Meaning if it's like a student from Red Wing open enrolled in Goodhue, they would have to be on Goodhue's basketball team.
but since they're from Red Wing and it's a tuition based,
Based program, they can participate with Red Wing yet.
okay.
So would this result in additional revenue? Perhaps. And here's kind of where we get into that tuition. Will it be an additional cost or not? Were these like students served somewhere else? Were they served at another district? Did they go to Hastings last year and now they're going to Five Rivers? Yeah, Red Wing's gonna get that revenue. That's a new student for us. Did they attend school in Red Wing last year? And then it's more than likely not new revenue because we included them in our enrollment projections.
You're good,
Okay.
yeah, just keep talking.
So we included them in our enrollment projections, so we probably already included them in the budget.
Maybe it's open.
We staffed for that student to be here because we didn't know where they were going to be. So it's unknown if Five Rivers online were not an option though, if the student would have gone elsewhere and we would have lost the revenue. That's where would we have lost 80 students? Would they have stayed and come in person? We don't know that. We don't know why they made their choice. Or if this just wasn't because it was a choice in Red Wing, that's what they choose. So these are the staffing needs that Sherry asked the board to consider on Thursday night. The board did approve all of these positions to be hired. So it was, and Holly, correct me if I'm wrong, the school counselor social worker at a 1.0, a MARS person, which will be split partially into this program, a special ed coordinator,
EL teacher,
a half the EL teacher, and what was the 5th one? Because it was 4.5.
social worker and school counselor are separate.
Okay,
Yes, they're separate.
they're separate. So that was, yeah, it was 4.5 FTE they authorized adding to the budget.
Yes.
So we'll have to rerun the budget once we get those 4.5 FTE in there. and
Want
make
me
sure
to
we're
sit up
still
there?
break even. I'm just taking a picture. I love this floor.
Isn't it great?
It's awesome.
And the reason for this, which got pretty interesting. Right now on the website for GCED, it says that enrollment is closed. So people have been calling, asking if the enrollment really is closed because we are not accepting outside districts outside of Goodhue County yet. But as an example of students needing school, St. Paul Public Schools had 400 kids still on their waiting list as of last week, and they shut it down. They're not accepting any of those 400 kids for online school. So what hopefully may happen is that once we take off closed on our enrollment online, people will start catching wind that this school is available. And when we pull in kids from outside of districts, outside of Goodhue County, we get 100% of their revenue. We get their levies, we get all of it. So it's not a money-making venture.
But it could help reduce the cost for the members.
It could help reduce the cost, and when you offer this type of service online, you can't short kids or families in the capacities of what we're talking about adding. You just can't. I mean, you could. It's not the way to do business.
So when that's, if a decision's made to remove the word close and start accepting or possibly accepting some students from other districts, is there a plan in place as to steps to get to a certain level and cap it, or are we gonna go to the 650 here that they have in their plan?
I don't know about what we're gonna do until we're faced with, because what we didn't wanna do was say to any resident person, you can't come, because it's filled with a person from St. Paul, it's filled with a person from Mounds View, it's filled with 7 people from Rochester. We didn't wanna have to say that to people, so we don't know necessarily what it's gonna look like if they remove closed.
That's why I kind of asked for steps, because you might get to a certain step if more kids decide to go online in Goodhue County, there'd be room for them.
That was actually a huge conversation, not this board meeting, but the one before. And if more kids sign up, then they need more teachers.
Yeah, there's a cost to that.
Yep.
It's just hard to predict where, because it's all elementary, that's one.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think it's quite fascinating. I think it's exciting for people to have an alternative. We talked about it, and Arlen brought it up quite a bit. Why can't we do our own? Well, once we explained the process of fighting for who gets what kid, and they can open enroll here, but then not enroll here. Is it like a 6-month waiting period before they could go from Goodhue to Red Wing to me, that sounds extremely cumbersome.
So where's the kids that you have here that are enrolled? Does it break down from elementary to middle school or high school, whatever, K through 6 and 7 through 12?
Yes.
I'm trying to see if I have that in here.
There's
You
that.
just go back.
That was Red Wing.
But that's okay. I mean, that's an example.
It's an example.
Yeah, so we have 25 elementary students right now. And so what Jackie had said about secondary students is that we can't necessarily decrease the teachers because it's based on credit and expertise and licensure. You're a math teacher, you might not be licensed in all maths. Or a science teacher might not be licensed in all the sciences. That we're looking at helping kids with credit recovery in addition to schooling.
And it's easier to staff an elementary than a high school.
And right now we have 5 or 6 teachers from Red Wing that are teaching an additional class at 5 Rivers Online, and they're doing it as an overload on their schedule.
Yep, and then GCED will reimburse Red Wing for that overload.
That cost.
Yeah. So, but that's an extra tax on for teachers in Red Wing to take that on, to help us start out, so
I don't think they're being forced to,
Nope, they were
they're
asked.
volunteer,
Mhm.
or,
absolutely
Yes.
volunteered, yeah.
yeah, it's not like we're taxing them because we want it. They elected to take that, do that.
But we needed the teacher, I mean, we needed the classes, and it's hard to hire a teacher for one.
I get it, I understand.
No, but you're right, it's a choice. So think of questions as we move this forward that the board should consider and bring them to me.
Okay.
Right, that was, if there
That's it?
are the questions, that was our.
We were talking about, last finance meeting we had, we talked about where we are with the budget cuts. That was supposed to be, I thought we were gonna do a
Oh,
monthly
yep, yep,
report
yep.
on that.
Thanks for reminding me.
Yes.
You have it or don't have it? I didn't see it in here.
I don't have it up.
Just bring it to the next
I'll bring it to
meeting.
the next one, yeah, it's not updated, it'll look exactly like it did last board meeting. 'cause it's
Okay, no,
usually
You got
update, what do we call it? The expenditure?
Budget, it's like budget tracking.
Budget tracking.
Yep.
No,
You should
yes.
have a first quarter report or thereabouts, because you have July, August, and September.
First quarter, we could do it by quarterly.
You hate to wait till the end to see all of a sudden we're
Yeah,
waiting.
you're right.
You can't make it up, so that's why you wanna do
Monthly.
Yeah,
well, quarterly at the absolute most, or every other month or something like that. Because,
yeah, and I think there's some discussions coming out of the last meeting about, class sizes at the high school, that it's going to impact that, once the board approves whatever the plan is. It will impact that number,
and we're waiting for the plan.
yes. And once we have the plan, that'll change that number.
By the way, Jim, to kind of, as far as timing, I think it'd be better just to do it every month because it's so easy to miss a month and then you don't remember if you already covered it and then all of a sudden you've lost 2 or 3 months. So that'd be my recommendation anyway.
That's fine, I mean, we already missed 1 month, so I was just gonna go 2 months, but yeah, every month is, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, and that's what we originally had said.
Yep.
It's okay. All right, anything else? Jim?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you, sir. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Adios, amigos.
Adios. Lisa, you can turn the volume on.
Yes, turn off the recording.
7th, 2021. It is 6 p.m. and I will call the open forum to order. To begin with the open forum, I would just like to welcome all of the people in attendance here today. And we'll begin by rising and saying the Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is right up in the corner. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So again, I'd like to welcome you all here. We have decided to open up the floor this evening for an open forum for our Redmond community members to give us some feedback on what they think would be a viable option for this building. We also had an open house just a little bit ago and gave everybody an opportunity to walk through the building and get some ideas. I'll ask one last time, is there anybody here who would like to speak at the open forum? Anyone here willing to speak at the open forum? Yes? Oh, okay, come on up, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
So I just need you to sign your name on the paper that's on the far right.
Over there.
Yep,
You just sit there too.
yep,
Right here?
yep.
All right.
So what I will say, I'll just give you some background information on how we got to today. Originally built in 1916, Jefferson School was vacant for several years after the Goodhue County Ed District moved programming to the River Bluff Educational Center. In August of 2020, the building was reopened as a mitigation strategy due to COVID-19. As planned, when it reopened, the school board closed the building in June of 2021 to save about $200,000 to $300,000 per year out of the general fund for additional staff, custodial, secretarial, nursing, paraprofessionals, and administrative support, utilities, and other maintenance expenses. Jefferson School was recommended for closure instead of another elementary school because Jefferson was intended to reopen for 1 year. It is the smallest building in our district. There's no operational kitchen, and it has the greatest short-term and long-term maintenance needs, including ADA compliance. The district is reviewing several important issues such as grade configurations, transportation routing, and building usage as we prepare for the 22-23 school year and beyond. We did solicit feedback from community in written form, and that is being compiled and will be, if not already, on our school board website or school website. And we have one person here to speak this evening, and so I will turn it over to you, Michael, if you wouldn't mind sharing your name and
I just want to say, first of all, my name is Michael Lickness Holmes. I want to thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to come tour the place and come speak in front of you. Last second choice, obviously. But after touring the place, I think this would be, there's a plethora of options, I think, between recreating another school, especially for the amount of kids in the neighborhood, but at the same time, I think a big need in this community is some type of community center to a certain extent. And when I say community center, I don't just mean one certain area, because if we have a community center, that would open up the avenue for a lot of things of being able to deal with helping let me rewind. My focus is a lot with the younger generation here in town. And so when I speak, I'm speaking for the fact of more programs for sober support with drug addiction, mental health, possible job opportunities, or a Job Corps type situation. And I don't know, I really feel that I hope a decision or something is made where not just schooling, but a lot more opportunities for the community of Red Wing would be involved with this place. Not just, like, I looked at the basketball courts, that'd be a great opportunity to set up like some little tournaments, like even in the winter time, a lot of these kids don't have nowhere to go. There's like, honestly, literally nowhere for, like, I'm getting a little emotional because these kids ain't got nowhere, really. I sit and drive and when I'm driving around town, I see these kids just walking around town with nothing to do. And even the kids I mentor, their main focus is like, we don't have nowhere. Like, after school's over with, there's nothing for these kids. And two of the kids I mentor are in this neighborhood. You know what I mean? I grew up in this neighborhood. I when I first moved here in '92, I was right down on Featherstone Road. Been in this town for, 30 years. I ain't gonna give my age away, but I've been around for a little bit, and the biggest focus I've noticed in these 30 years is a consistent support for the younger generation. And I just want to say thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Thank you so much. Sure. Anybody else? Anybody else for the open forum? All right, I'll turn it over to my colleagues here at the school board. Does anybody have anything that they would like to add?
I'll start right there.
Okay.
I want to thank everybody for coming out here. We have a number of 10, 12 people here that we're going to sign up and see if they can all help volunteer at the school district this calendar year. Alan, don't let them out the door. No, seriously, thank you for coming. Beautiful building. Many of you toured it. I spent 6th grade here. This is Dobler's class up on top of the corner there. Kitchen was there. The gymnasium was here. So back then there was neighborhood schools. Before that there was rural schools. They went into cities because of different economic and different reasons. I think we all could say that nobody wants to go back to the rural schools, but there might be a handful of that. But what do we do with this building? We put it up for sale twice. And we didn't sell it either time, and it ended up being advantageous for us for when COVID hit, the pandemic hit, to get us some separation and get people out here. But it is costly. We'd love to do a neighborhood school, but like the chair said, it's a small building. It has short-term and long-term needs for a school district, ADA compliant especially. But Michael talked about, I think what we've kind of kicked around informally, just the one-on-ones together, is if there's somebody out in the area and the community that looking for, get involved in a community center, however you want to call it, a center or something that could be utilized for the whole city of, the whole school district of Red Wing, mainly the city. We have Steve Cohen from the city here who's listening to this, and he's in the planning department there. But that's why we have the open forum tonight, to hear the ideas, and so you can hear what we're thinking too. And I'm just one person. But I would, financially, we can't keep this building, keep it running the way we would like to. Just the cost is just too big, too much as we're going forward. Our enrollment is declining for various reasons. We're not going to get into that tonight. But overall, this is a beautiful building. Been here for 105 years. Alan and his staff has done a wonderful job maintaining it during the last number of years. But at the end of the day, we're open. I'm open to ideas, what the community, some group out there wants to come on board, take on the building, take on the cost, and to the betterment of the community. So who that is, what that is, I don't know what that is. So that's really one of the reasons why we're here tonight to talk about it and gives us time to do it, so, and
Can I just ask one general operating question? What's the average utilities cost to keep the building going?
We have a question in the audience about how much it costs to keep the building going in a year, and we'll let Jackie answer that. To put you on the spot.
Pointing at me. It depends on the winter we have, how cold the winter is, but it could be with the entire maintenance budget for this building is between $30,000 and about $45,000 a year.
a little bit less than I thought. Remember we talked about 150 to 70,000.
Yeah, if we add the time for the custodian to be over here, it gets closer to
The
70,
mowing,
but
snow
I don't know
shoveling.
if we would
Yeah.
reduce that if we reduced the budget.
So, thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you. Yes, go ahead, Helen.
Yes. One of the main, things that makes this so difficult is that it hasn't been updated for students with disabilities, for adults with disabilities. And yes, we'd love to keep it open, but we can't say everyone can come in except for you and you and you. That's, doesn't work anymore, and it shouldn't work that way. So to put in an elevator, I think at one time, the cost was, I don't wanna misquote, does anybody remember?
500.
Yeah.
400 to 500, yeah.
400,000 to 500,000.
Yes.
And then to make sure that all the doorways were compliant so that people could get in and out with wheelchairs and the ramps and just, there were a lot of things. And then there was something with the busing. You have to have so many feet for busing in between buses and stops and a parent pickup. So that can get really, really tricky. And so you have to make sure that you're in compliance with those codes. And if you're not, there's a disaster waiting to happen. Yes.
Are there any historic exceptions when your building is so old and you know, what are they, when the school closed when officially, not this last time, but the time before? Was
That's
that
a good question, and I
15 years
don't know
ago?
the history on that.
I would say that it depends on what the building use is gonna be used for.
But I mean, it was a full-fledged school, is what I'm saying,
Yes.
at one point, and it wasn't updated. What was were they given a grace period or?
Oh, I can answer.
So no, go ahead, I'll let Jackie go.
Okay. We were given a grace period as long as we didn't start something new. As soon as we started new construction, we had to bring everything up. Once we start remodeling, we have to bring up the ADA compliant stuff.
And that was back when kids would be bused to schools far, far away from home because this school didn't have the access.
But buses did come here before.
Yes, but not with students who had special needs in a way that they had to access the building.
Not quite understanding, but.
If a child had a wheelchair, they wouldn't be able to get up and down on first and second floor.
But I mean, if you were still a school then, so you're saying to do any remodeling, period, you would have to be compliant. Is that like putting in new flooring or what qualifies as remodeling?
We would have to check with the Department of Ed to make sure.
But to answer your other question about the historic register, I do know we had an interested buyer in the past who was looking into all of that, and I think there was some momentum there. There might be something behind all of that. I can't speak to it any further than that. Do you remember Superintendent Anderson about that?
Yeah, I know that one of the two buyers who initially, offered something was planning to pursue that, but I don't know the status, if it was a go or not, or what else they had to do.
I remember it was pretty cumbersome.
There's a lot of hoops, but I think there was definitely interest, and this building is very historic. So I would think, it's not getting any younger as we continue these years going by, so it's getting more historical as we speak. So who knows? If somebody was willing to take that on and look into that, there might be some wonderful, great things that could come out of this building. Other board members or anybody else who would like to speak?
I'll go after Arlen, yeah. I was
Okay,
gonna say
all
one
right.
more thing.
Okay.
I love this building, I guess. I didn't for 7 years when I was younger because I had to go to school here, but I spent 6 years here, I believe it was 1960, or 7 years to 67, kindergarten through 6th grade. So a lot of memories here. I can point out the classroom I was in when President Kennedy was shot. All these little things that come back to you when you walk through here, and it's great, but that's not a reason to keep a building necessarily. I would love to see us make use of it one way or another in the district. I think there's potential that we may have to look at more space later on. Who knows where everything's going. On the other end, we're going more and more towards distance learning. I think COVID changed the whole format of schooling as we knew it. And some of that is going to direct us to using more technology and maybe come down on our space needs, or maybe larger classes. I don't know. I want to be careful. I don't want to alarm anybody, but there's technology, to me, advanced probably 5 to 10 years because of COVID on how it's being utilized in our educational system. Is it good the way it was used? I'm not going to say that. It's a stepping stone because we were forced to do something then. But getting back to this building, I mean, Jim said he went here in 6th grade. I went through 6th grade. The gymnasium was being built the year I was in 6th grade. That year they built a gymnasium here. I call it a gymnasium. Colville and Hancock, all 3 of them were done at the same time back at that time. I'm just so glad that we have people from the public here, and I don't want to talk anymore. I'd love to have some of you that didn't speak up, just speak up and give your thoughts or whatever here and utilize this time. That's what it's about, instead of the board standing here talking or sitting here talking and you listening. I want to hear, so I'd love to hear from more of you if there's more people want to speak.
Ireland was here 7 years, but 2 of them have probably spent over in the principal's office.
You're right, because I had 2 different principals, Miss Grassbone when I was in 4th grade, and Mr. Collins when I was in 6th grade because of retirement, so.
Yes, Mr. Holmes.
Before I moved to Red Wing, I lived in South Minneapolis with my great grandmother, and I was raised in this place off of 38th Avenue called Sabathani Community Center, if anybody knows of that area. And at that time, my great grandmother, you know, they had a GED center for adult GEDs, younger GEDs, or GED help and all that stuff. And I kind of envisioned something like that, you know, the way they are, the way they had it, like they had after school programs for kids. Like, I was never really on the streets if my great grandmother could, you know, have a say in it. But I was just saying, I'm just envisioning the more and more I think about it, this place reminds me of where I grew up at. Mm-hmm. You know, sitting here with my great grandmother, helping her get her GED as I'm going through school myself. Those are memories I think that could be passed along to different generations, families, whatever. But I just wanted to throw that out there because it kind of hit me.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I do have to add that one thing that we have heard loud and clear through the years in thinking about selling this building is how important the outside space is to this neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And so I don't want to lose that perspective either, because I think this neighborhood has very much told us, whatever you do, keep a place where the kids can play. Yep. Mm-hmm. All right, anybody else? Yeah, oh, go ahead. Oh, sorry, thank you.
So is the school board's intent, is the district's intent to sell the building at this point? Are they looking for a buyer, or where are you at in your decision making as a district?
Do you want to answer that, Superintendent Anderson?
Sure, and first of all, I want to apologize for not being there in person. I have a family issue back in Montana, and so that's why I'm participating virtually. I think the last question was the most important one. Where are we in the process? And this is just Karsten speaking. It's I think we're at the beginning of a process, and we want to hear feedback from the community. not only with the open forum, but also the written comments that either are or will be posted. I will say there's some very good ideas that were expressed in those written comments. We did redact personal information from them, but they will be posted. And I hope that everyone, all the board members, read them carefully, because I think there's some good ideas. The one thing that I want to stress is that I don't think we should make a rash decision. I think we need to go through the planning process and really talk about grade configurations, transportation. Do we want some specialized schools or programs like Michael, suggested? Does community education have an interest in it? Do other community groups have an interest? And really take our time before we decide for sure. I'm envisioning that that hopefully we'll have an educational planner perhaps work with us to help us step through this process. And I think we can hire an educational planner if we can get some outside funding to pay for that work. And so I'm actively working on some possibilities there. And of course, I'll take everything through the school board so that we're all on the same page. But we don't want to sell an asset too early because we don't know what the federal government's going to do about preschool education. We don't know how our district will change over the next couple of years. So I urge the board to take a little time, be diligent, keep moving forward, but take a little time before we decide for sure.
Which is why it's so important that even after tonight, if you go home and you think, oh, why didn't I say that? Or what would be really a great idea? Please send your ideas our way. There is a handout on that front table, and there are 3 names with numbers that you can take with you. Give any of them a call and they'd be happy to take down your comments, Mr. Gaylor, Ms. Paradis, and Mr. Anderson. Or you can just call the school district and say, hey, please get this message to the superintendent, because we really do value your input and really want to know what the community is thinking and putting our heads together, because we want it to be a win-win for everybody. Yes?
Does the district have the ability to rent the building?
Yes.
You have framework that, so if some of these interests came together, you can almost split the floors and have community ed and any kind of training and part it out a little bit, and there's some grant money available for that, and that would buy you guys some time. If in 3 years you decide, hey, we want this building, it's still here and it's still yours. Where the community would benefit from some rental figures, if you could come up with what you would need to get to keep it, cover costs and keep it in the mix, and then the playground stays, and there might be multiple parties that would make use of the space, and maybe they wouldn't need the compliance. And maybe the school could still tap into some of the resources as needed ongoing. But the community would need to know the figures to make the choices and get the monies.
Sure. So I'm hearing you say loud and clear transparency.
Yeah, just so, if it turns out it's affordable for these different groups to get together and make that happen, they need the numbers on that. That'd be great.
Right. When we were looking at selling it before, there was a huge forum down at the public library. And there were, 100 people there from the neighborhood, and just in general, people who had gone to school here, their heart and soul was here, their grandkids were here way back in the day. And that was kind of like, isn't there anything else you can do with it?
Right.
Besides A or B, which was sell it to this person or sell it to this person. And so, one of the things that I came out of there was with a clear plan on what the proposals are and what's gonna come in place in the building, instead of, well, this is buyer A and this is buyer B. And then it gets real tricky with the lawyers in terms of what we can divulge to the public about who, so there were some confidentiality pieces in there, but for me, the big piece was, well, what is it? What's gonna happen? It's right across the street from me. It's down the hill from me. This is where my kids play every day. Who's gonna be utilizing the building? So I think that the community was very loud in their last approach on what they thought was best for the community in terms of this neighborhood. And so I'm all for transparency.
And the other thing we want to make, why we're starting this discussion now is, we don't want the building to sit here for a couple of years and just kind of deteriorate. That's why we decided to speed up the process, wait till school started, and then wait till September to get this going, because the last thing we want to do is let this thing sit for a couple of years and then try to do something with it. But so, taking our time is fine, but we have to keep stepping forward as we go because of the building sitting idle. We want to certainly use this building, perhaps have a building available for whatever the community is, partners wants to do it, to use it for. But yeah,
Mandy.
Hi, Mandy Arden, Revenue Outreach. First, I just want to say thank you. I think the openness and hearing what the community wants and what parents want and what youth want is really important. And so I just appreciate the steps that you're taking to do that. And then I just want to echo some things that were already said. I think transparency in numbers is really great. So community groups and organizations and associations and all of us working together on these things, whether we're siloed or actually working together, can know like really what are our options. Like numbers matter when you're small grant-funded organizations. You know, I hear 400,000 to 500,000 for an elevator, and I'm like, okay, that's more than our yearly budget. But it's a number that I can write down and really have concrete information. So I appreciate that you're going to take some time to consider that. And then I just want to echo everything Michael said. I encourage you to think about youth and parents and families and how the use of this building will impact them in youth development throughout the years. I think that this is a great space to think about community-centered approaches, happening in here in this community and so close to downtown. You know, I think about, I've been the director of Red Wings Outreach for over 8 years now, and I can't even tell you how many times I've heard youth center, community center, nonprofit center brought up in this amount of time, whether it was the schools that have been turned into other things by now, or this school. And I think our community is shouting at us that they want a community-centered something. And I appreciate that you're willing to listen to that and possibly not just sell it and say, hey, do it, but maybe even partner on it. Maybe it's a partnership. So thank you, that's all.
Thank you. Chris?
Just because I know that the federal government has invested in cities at this point, we have a city council member here. I would like to know if there's any investment that the city would like to make to the district to revitalize this area.
who's from the city council here?
Okay.
He's a planning department.
I mean, I just in general, anyone know of any investment from the potential city as well as the district?
Not at this stage.
Okay.
Prior, when there was some conversations about selling it before, there was, with the city council and the school district, COVID happened and those talks ceased.
Okay.
So I don't know how that would go about reopening some of the conversations or what committee would do that or how it would move forward, but I definitely think it would be a conversation worth having. I
Just
wouldn't
wondering
want to rule that
about the
out.
federal dollars that have come to cities and how that might be able to infiltrate into the district.
Superintendent Anderson might be able to shed some light on that too. His name
And
is.
I'll add to what Holly said. Certainly, we could approach the city. I did have a meeting scheduled with the city representatives about a week ago, but I had possible COVID, and so I couldn't go to the meeting. But that is being rescheduled so that we can start that dialogue. Once again, though, I'm reaching out, talking with some people, but everything will go through the school board. So I'll make sure that everyone's informed along the way.
Thank you. Arlen.
I can address that a little bit. 2 or 3 years ago, I met with some members of the city of Red Wing and talked about some things here. And at that time, there was not a lot of what I considered city support for anything here. There was interest in owning or having a playground upgraded, and the city would put money into that. But I just want to say that that was then, this is now, and times change. And I really think all it takes is for the public in the city of Red Wing to come forth to their council members to say, if they want to, we want to see this happen or this happen with there, it might create some momentum. Like we said, we had 2 failed purchase agreements. One was because of playground issues that we thought we were gonna get and didn't get. And then the last one was a series, a lot of stuff, and I think we were just, was it after COVID actually hit, before that finalized, and that was gonna turn us into housing at that time. But, so, please talk to your city council representatives if you have an idea, and encourage them to support doing something if you have an idea here. I'm a strong supporter of trying to do what's good for the community with the site. That's me. Certainly money is worth, we need to get what we can out of the site and different things, but the big thing is, let's make it fit the community. That's my goal.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm Maureen Nelson from United Way. And I've been for 11 years hearing what Randy has been hearing. But when people come to United Way for services, or any of the nonprofits in town, they get sent from place to place to place to place. And my vision is for a building, not particularly this building, but this could be it, is a place where all those nonprofits and family service agencies could be housed, so that when someone comes in from the cold for help, we can get them to the services they need, instead of sending them off to walk, usually from the county building down to Hope Coalition or over to the food shelf. That's what I think would be a wonderful plan for this neighborhood and for the city as a whole.
Great idea, Maureen.
A one-stop hub.
Now you get people that jump on and do that.
Randy, you're on it.
I love that.
I'm always up. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
How else are you gathering feedback? I know that the emails, but like I didn't even know about this meeting, except because I was the director of Red Wing Youth Outreach, I had an invitation from Carson as a partner. So I'm just curious, what are the ways moving forward you're gonna gather more feedback from the community?
Go ahead, Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, I can certainly explain what we've done so far, but I'm sure board members will come up with additional ideas too. So we did put a notice in the Republican Eagle for the meeting tonight, as well as a request to send written comments. The email was sent to all parents, as well as to community members who have signed up for those kinds of written notices. And then I did reach out to many of our community partners. For example, Youth Outreach is a great example because we have an agreement with them. We have an active involvement with them. And so I did send notices to about 20, maybe 25 different community partners. I still have more on my list, because I'm trying to compile a more comprehensive list of community partners that will engage in this kind of dialogue into the future about Jefferson and other school issues.
Mr. Anderson, did you put it in the news? Was it in the newsletter too?
Yes.
And you're the communication director?
Yes. It was right on the top.
Yeah, I thought it was,
Yeah.
but I just wanted to make sure.
Thank you, Jim.
Good question.
And we have a communications director now who can support some of this, pushing out the message. She's very creative. She's been doing it for years.
And does feedback have to come through an email, or could there be a Google form that is anonymous that people could fill out?
That would be one for our communications person. Like, I'm very familiar with the Google Forms, so where's the link? Who would get it? How would you keep it anonymous? Who would collect all the submissions?
We will work on that. That's a great suggestion. Thank you. Other comments? Holly, did you have more? For you, Sue.
Oh, I forgot.
I can go otherwise.
Yeah, go Anna, yeah.
So I personally would really love to see the school stay some type of public space or publicly owned, whether it's through the school district or through the city, because of like what you brought up, Pam, with that outdoor space and the ways that this space has been a public part of the community. and especially this neighborhood for, 100 years plus. So, and I think that was one of those huge concerns that, people had about this suddenly becoming privately owned, and what would happen to that space, and would there still be a playground, and would my kids be welcome and safe and all of that to still be able to use this space. I think the idea of renting it out is great. Of course, most of you know that like my other job, my day job is running a nonprofit, and I also have heard a lot of those same things. My nonprofit isn't service oriented, it's art, but still having that collective space, and that's something that the old Mayo building kind of served for a while, but it had its own intrinsic issues as well. But I think that type of community center is definitely a need, just whether or not that can be done with the, within the framework of the district and making it financially feasible for the district. But I do like the idea of the district owning it for, at least into the, the next few years, right? As we kind of see what happens with our, education landscape. And, obviously with COVID, it was really great that we had this to be able to use last year. It was fabulous. So I think for the district to still own it would be wonderful, but of course that has to be financially feasible. We can't just have the building or, just let it rot and, not be having income come in from it, whether it's renting it out or whatever the case may be. We can't just bleed money into the space sitting vacant. But I would love to see it be something. I think it's a great space. Of course, all those ADA issues and the class sizes that you can have here, you don't get as much bang for your buck, with like all of the administration and stuff that you need to have in a school for the number of students that can be here, especially with the ADA issues. But even without that, just the size of the classrooms and things like that, and other needs like not having a working cafeteria and things like that. So, as a school board member, it needs to make financial sense for us to have it. As a community member, I want to see it be something that benefits the community. As a nonprofit leader, I want to see something that, can help all of the agencies who are already trying to do a lot of this type of work.
Mandy.
I have last questions. I didn't plan on talking, but here we are. So when will the conversations happen? Like, what are next steps around like possibly partnering, whether that's renting, partnering as a nonprofit community center? What are your thoughts? What are your next steps?
My thought, and probably you would say the same thing, Superintendent Anderson, is that if there are people who are interested in moving forward and some ideas, I would contact Superintendent Anderson starting October 3rd, and anytime after that, and just starting that dialogue. Anything you want to add to that, Karsten?
Yeah, that's my initial inclination too. I know with some other leased areas like land at the high school, we did go through a request for proposal process. So I think it's going to depend on what the board wants to do in terms of, would we want to work with just someone who approaches us, or do we want to open it up to anyone as far as a leasing arrangement?
And again, this is our first steps here. So, I think we're open to the process and next steps. So we probably want to provide a fair opportunity.
I think, having people start talking about this is really good. Whether or not, how far along we get, we're not gonna get there overnight. It's gonna take time to do it. But Anna hit it on the nail, and not being, try to be Debbie Downer here, but it all gonna come down to who's got the money to do something here. We all have great ideas, but at the end of the day, there's a cost to put somebody in this building, however that is. And we're hoping people out there in the community groups start talking and brainstorming and look at ways to meet those needs that people talk about, the community's talking about doing something, and how we can do that as a community. So as to our building space, I'll be the other one. We have a lot of land by the high school, middle school, and Burnside School that if we ever had to add on to buildings, those would probably be more of the areas that would probably be looking in the next 25 years of down the road. But I think with the pandemic, with technology, buildings you'll probably see around the country around here is not going to be going up as much because people have found out that they can work remotely and do things without being inside a structure like this or any other structure. So Michael had a question back there.
Speaking of funding, would the school board be willing to help fund this? And if the discussions continue and they further on, is there a possibility of the school board helping with funding in any type of way?
That's a really great question.
Can I say something?
Yeah.
related to that? I would just say that, first of all, and I'll answer your question in a second, Michael, but just first of all, thank you all for being here tonight and offering your ideas and talking about community together. This kind of warms my heart having this discussion. And Michael, I so appreciate you starting it out with the idea of a community center, because it's something that we've heard for a long time. Something Holly was saying that, when Anna and I were not on the board, it was something loud and clear that they heard that this school is important to a lot of people, not just, especially people in this neighborhood, but not just people in this neighborhood. And it's important to the community and something that really needs to be taken seriously and considered. So because of that, I think we should consider as a board partnering with other community organizations. I definitely don't think that it should be thrown out the window, and to say that, where the money is where we're gonna go. I would say that's, in my mind, I hope that's not what we do. I hope that we take the time to consider what the community wants and what the community can creatively do together, because we have a lot of really brilliant, passionate people who are already working with our youth, and they have a lot to bring to the table. And I think it would be unfortunate if we as a district weren't involved with that.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you all for being here and for all of your ideas.
Go ahead, Mandy.
Can I just piggyback off of that? So is there discussion to use the American Rescue Plan funding meant for after school resources here, or even applying for grants like full service community schools?
Yeah, I can answer that, Pam. Certainly, we're receiving, some monetary funds because of COVID, and so those are generally spoken for. We do need to spend about 20% for learning recovery, and right now we're planning to supplement or enhance our current summer school programming and before and after school programming. So I don't know if Jefferson would necessarily be in that mix. We did receive a grant opportunity to develop a community school. And so, we're looking at that possible grant. The only thing is that we would need to make sure that it's a really solid proposal that has buy-in from the board, before we submit something like that. And so we just started looking at that possible grant opportunity. I hope that answered the two questions.
I was just gonna add that when we looked at selling this place, and we were about an inch away the first time, thank you, Arlen. The first time we looked at selling it, it was about, I think we were selling it for 220,000 or
405.
205,000.
405.
Huh?
405.
405 was the first time? I didn't think no, not the Rochester group.
No, it was the first time before that, department group.
Yeah, that was like 220 something. No?
I know my numbers.
I know you do, but I do too. Okay, anyway, it doesn't even matter. To me, what we were getting was not replacing what we had. And I've always been a proponent of, so when we think about, well, we're gonna get this money and we're gonna use it for X, how far does it go? So that was one of the things to think about when we talked about selling it again. And it seemed at the time it was a foregone conclusion, we were just gonna sell the building. And then we had a tremendous amount of people say, wait a minute, we selling it to, why selling it? What's gonna happen? So,
I think the short answer is that we're completely open to options. I think there's a lot that we can do to partner. I don't want to speak for our finances at all, but it would take some creativity to financially partner. It's not impossible. And so I think between grants and some creativity, I think anything's really possible. So we just need some partners. We need somebody to help us take the ball and run with it. And we're very excited by the interest that you've shown here this evening and the feedback that we've gotten written. We'll continue to solicit feedback as we move forward. And again, if you're on your way home and you think, oh, why didn't I say that? Or, tomorrow when you're on your walk and you have this brilliant idea, please bring them forward. We want to hear your ideas. And we're very excited about it. So we're kind of at our time now, so I want to be respectful of our agenda moving forward this evening, but I'll give anybody the last word. Anyone?
Thank you for coming.
Yes.
So you would be up for the sale of the project if it came with the community focus?
I think we would. Yeah. I think anything is viable at this point. We want to hear your ideas. Yeah.
Okay.
Michael,
Well, I'm sorry.
last word. You began, we'll let you have the last word. You ended.
I just want to say, I think, we all know that there's been a lot of issues of making Red Wing more welcoming
Yeah.
and more inclusive. And I think whatever decisions made with this building, I hope that that is also part of the thought process of making this town more welcoming and more inclusive. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for
All
coming
right,
this evening.
thank you. We will adjourn our forum,
Thank you.
and for the workshop, we'll start at 7. All right.
All right,
thank you.
thank you. Everybody's got like $10,000. We want to.
Call the meeting to order. It is 7 p.m. All school board members are here minus Nikki Buck, who is unable to be here this evening. We've already done the Pledge of Allegiance. And so we'll just go ahead and roll right into the agenda. Do we have to?
We have Pledge of Allegiance, we have some spectators outside the door.
They're here voting for the community center right now.
Yes, we are. Hi, everyone.
This must be their evening meeting spot.
Yeah. We're in there, Steve.
Yes, we are. All right. Well, we can't really change the agenda, so we'll just plow forward. The first thing on our agenda is the recruitment and hiring, and so I will turn it over to Jackie and Amy and Karsten to give us an update on the review of our hiring practices.
All right, so we would like to welcome representatives from Abdel Eigenmeyer's Workforce Solutions. We have Brenna Ramey.
Close enough.
And then on our Google Meet, we have Leah Davis and Tamara Hastings as well that will present their results.
Can you all see me where I'm sitting
Yeah.
and hear me? Wonderful.
If you want to, you can turn the camera on that.
No, thank you. I'd like to not see myself. Well, it's a pleasure to see you. And again, some of you I spoke with before, to meet all of you. We have Tamara up there in the middle top row, and Leah, who's in the second row, the second one in. So I'm gonna let Leah introduce us and we'll get started.
Yeah, great. Thank you all. School board, thank you for inviting us here tonight. And again, Jackie, Amy, and Karsten, thank you so much for all of your assistance and collaboration on this project. So just a brief introduction of who we are. So again, my name's Leah Davis. I'm a partner at Abdel Myers and president of AEM Workforce Solutions. So Abdel Myers is a regional CPA firm. We do a lot of work with public and government clients, and our team, the Workforce Solutions team, focuses entirely on people-related consulting and issues. So everything from payroll to process automation, human resources consulting, compliance, to very strategic types of initiatives with our clients. And we do a lot of work with public sector employers. So we appreciate the opportunity to work with the Red Wing School District. So very high level. This project is what we call our HR, an assessment project. So in this case, we really took a look at a specific area of focus within the district and wanted to focus on sort of the recruiting, selection, and onboarding, hiring and onboarding process within the district. Just a couple key things. Brenna's going to get into some of the details of the process we followed and some of our findings and recommendations. But very high level, just a reminder that this was not intended to be an audit of specific hires or things that had happened in the past. We really focused on what are the current processes and how do they align with compliance. Are they meeting the objectives that the district wants to achieve in terms of recruiting and onboarding? And then looking ahead to efficiency and just sort of ongoing sustainability of some of these processes, if there were opportunities for improvement or to mitigate risk or potential compliance issues. So I'll kind of tee it up to Brenna. Brenna's a senior manager on our team with years of experience in very high level HR roles. And she and Tamara Hastings, who's also a senior associate on our HR consulting team, met with a lot of leaders in your organization, different stakeholders from board members to leadership to departmental hiring managers. And so hopefully we'll kind of do a summary of findings and recommendations, and we'll make sure to leave plenty of time at the end for specific questions. So thank you. Brenna, it's all yours.
Thank you, Leah. I don't know if Leah and Tamara, you guys can see, but I feel like I'm behind because I don't have visual aids in the presentation. So I'll tell you that these two books are very good and I've read them. So I can at least use your visual aids to say I'm engaged with all of you. So wonderful. So thank you, Leah, for introducing us and what we've done. I'd love to kind of talk with you all about what our process is. So we believe really strongly in exactly what actually the previous meeting talked about, which is transparency and not only what did we do and what do we recommend, but as importantly, how did we get to that decision and how did we get to our information? So I'll go through it. The board has received a copy of the official report. So the actual report, I think, is like 11 pages long. So as not to be a person who gives your report and then reads the report verbatim. I'm with you, Jim, on let's be smart and efficient with that. We like to work smarter, not harder. So I'm just going to speak from a narrative perspective and recap some of what our recommendations are. And certainly feel free to ask questions from the report, which I have here and we can reference, or from the actual narrative that I speak about. So whenever we do, we call it an assessment. It's like a scorecard, right? So it's just like a teacher gives a student a report that's not meant to be indicative of one test, right? So we look at an assessment the same way a school system would look at a report card to say, you might have a good day, you might have a bad day. We're not going to make a judgment on every single day. We're going to look at and say, what is the overall scorecard of whatever we happen to be looking at? We do that with two major steps. We focus on people and on process, like Leah was talking about. So the first thing we do is start looking at who are all the people that are involved in the process, right? So who are the people that use it? Who are the people that it affects? And most importantly, who is it intended to serve, right? So all processes and policies serve something. It might serve compliance. It might serve a mission. It might serve a vision. It might serve a community need, but everything serves something. So we started and looked at the people first. So we interviewed actually 10 people. And I want to say maybe we got 11 in the end. I apologize, I went to double check that number. And each of those people we spoke to for about 30 minutes to an hour. And our goal was to say, how does the process work for you today? What does it do for you? What doesn't it do for you? Really, more importantly, what are the needs that you have when it comes to recruitment, selection, and onboarding? And I want to be really clear when I say the word recruitment. This is not captured in the report, but we have spent a lot of time in the last year talking with all of the people that we work with and don't work with about what does recruitment look like. And when we say recruitment, I'm not just talking about what website do you post on, right? Because that ultimately, there's a candidate shortage. I don't need to preaching to the choir. I realize that there isn't. Everyone's like, okay, what is the website we should use where all the candidates are? Like it doesn't exist. So recruitment talks about how does a job get posted? How do you determine there's a need? Who approves it? How does it get posted? Where does it get posted? How do candidates apply for it? How do those applications get to the person who's interviewing? So recruitment is more about how does somebody outside of the district get into the district for an interview? That's what recruitment speaks about. So we spoke with leaders in the administrative departments, in the operational departments, in HR, of course, and Jackie. We also spoke with in the community education, in food services, and the sports. So we spoke with a very broad variety, including the board. That was one of our things that Carson and I had spoken about, and he was 100% said, let's lead with that to involve everybody from all sides. So we start with the people and say, what do you need? What's working? What are the challenges? Then we look at all of the policies and we say, what are all the policies? And we look at all the things. Of course, we're looking from a compliance perspective. And like Leah said, we really don't focus on how have these policies been applied. What we're focused on is, do these policies, even if they're applied, actually meet the needs of who they're intended to serve? And that's going back to that people thing. It's this real, we go in circles a lot. And we actually look at policies and then go back to the departments and say, well, who does this serve and how would that work and what would it look like? So it's a real circular process as we go through it. So that's the process of how we got to that beautiful 11-page report that you've been provided with. So when we look at the report, we came up with a couple of suggestions, and I've narrowed it down. I went through again and wrote notes on all of the recommendations fall into what I would say are 6 buckets. So I'll just briefly go through those. I'm happy to talk about each of them at length, of course, but I want to give time for any questions, and I don't want to regurgitate a report that you've had the opportunity to read, just out of respect for your time. So the first thing that we really all felt strongly about, and that became very clear to us as we were going through both our people interviews and our process review, is that the current model Well, compliant, very, very detailed, covers all the bases. There's no, if you look at the policy from the outside, there's nothing wrong with the policy. But what we heard universally was it's very cumbersome when it's applied to a one-size-fits-all experience. So that there was very, when you talk about, for example, hiring for a full-time teacher for a position that's around all the time, and then hiring for, one of the ones that jumped out at me was for a lifeguard who works for 3.5 months and we would consider a transient or a temporary position. So in the old policy, the current one, I would say, it's all the same. Everybody on paper gets treated the same. And that really slows the process down and creates a lot of barriers. So our main recommendation that you'll see in the report is to move away from that one size fits all, because it doesn't fit all. So it doesn't, and I think even if you applied it 100% moving forward and said, hey, we're all in on this policy, our professional opinion would be you would lose candidates pretty quickly. Just the job market is moving that fast. Yesterday, I almost cried in my car because I help people hire. And I saw that Amazon and Target, you can walk in and have a job offer in under 30 minutes, and they're promising a college education. So it's a real challenge, and even large companies are moving very quickly. So it's just a tough thing. So our main recommendation is, instead of having a one size fits all, to look at what is our recruitment, selection, and onboarding process for 3 main buckets. And those buckets are in the report, so again, they're all in there, but they're full-time and part-time regular employees. And in the world of employment classification, a regular employee is somebody who that position exists, it's intended to continue existing, it's not temporary, it's not for a certain period of time. Even if it is a contract position that's only for a certain period of time, a teaching position would be considered a regular position. You every year are going to have teachers that come through. You might have a different varying number of them, but that position itself is regular. Then you have full-time and part-time seasonal positions. These are positions that regularly, so an example of this would be a paraprofessional, right? So it could be part-time, could be full-time. Oftentimes those are not contracts, sometimes they are, depending on how you structure it. So these are positions that are seasonal. There's always a beginning and an end. And the way you look at seasonal is that it's not anything happening in between, right? So a paraprofessional isn't working on lesson plans, theoretically, during the summer, preparing for the next year, right? So that would be a seasonal. And then we have temporary and transient. And temporary and transient is where I think a lot of the time could be saved universally. And I think it could just save a lot of headaches for candidates and particularly for the people hiring in those positions. So one of the things we talked about with the group, with Amy and Jackie and superintendent, was to look at utilizing your HRIS system. So they use a program called Applitrax. And Applitrax is what you call an applicant tracking system. So everything comes into that, it's entered. And we really believe in harnessing technology as much as you possibly can. So technology can remove a lot of barriers. So we shared a lot of feedback and ideas with Amy to say, hey, you could do this, you could change this, here's how you could speed it up. An example of that is if anyone's tried, and we actually tell people to go out and do this. We'll say, hey, pick up your phone and go try to apply to somewhere that would be in the same wage range or type of employment as an entry-level position. And you don't have to create a login, you don't have to create an account, right? So people do it on their phones, not on their computers. That's a major change in the applying of positions. So what we know based on a bunch of research that we can happily share is that people, when they have to create accounts, just walk away. There's so many other job opportunities, they just don't apply and they just move on to something else. So we call it removing barriers to application, right? So how quickly can they get in your candidate pool and how quickly can you touch them from the candidate pool and interview them, right? So we want to make barriers. We also made a recommendation about adding in an interview process in Applitrax, which I believe is actually done already, for internal candidates to be able to apply in Applitrax. While that's not external recruitment, we certainly believe that having that tracked everywhere, because I like data, right? So we want to be able to look at the end of the year and say, how many internal candidates applied, right? So how many for this position, what did it look like? So allowing, it also really removes the weight off the shoulders of the manager who's trying to say, well, did I get this to the right person? And who do I email it to? And what's, how do I do that? And is someone on vacation? There's just human error. So moving that into the AppleTrack system is a really easy, I think, win across the board. Okay, so we talked about using the applicant tracking system. We talked about removing applications for, removing barriers to applications, particularly for seasonal, part-time, your temporary and transient workers. So it's okay, you do have to ask all the questions, but a lot of the questions can be asked as a part of the onboarding process, right? So an application can be as simple as, are you legally allowed to be employed in the United States? Do you want the job? Have you had a job? Are you old enough? I mean, in this climate, the answer is great. Come on in. I would love to interview you, right? So it's like, oh, you're breathing? That's fantastic. Okay, good. So removing barriers. And I think part of what we know is that, so this is my, I was saying to Leah, it makes me kind of sad to say this out loud. This is my 21st year of human resources, which when I think about how different it was when I entered the human resources field, I started my career with Hilton Hotels. So I was hiring for front desk agents and housekeepers and food servers and very entry-level positions. And I would have a sea of candidates that I could weed out based on what's your job history, how long have you been employed, how many jobs have you had. It was a whole different world. And now my peers who are still in hotels, they're like, well, yeah, you'll walk in, I'll offer you a job and I'll work out the rest later, right? Like I'll figure out if I can hire you on the backside and let the background check kind of weed you out if it's not going to work. So it is a major change in hiring in many industries, particularly in your entry-level positions, which is why we really advocate for, it's okay to say, hey, when we hire for a teacher, that standard is going to be different because that teacher, how that's tied to the mission and the vision of Red Wing Public Schools and what that looks like, the safety issues, right, what they're doing, what's on their shoulders for leading the education. Those are all big deals. You can say that's different than a concession stand worker. You can say, I'd like to change that process. The second big change, so we say different categories, right, the 3 categories. The second large change is we're recommending an adjustment to your point system. You have to have a point system. I can go into the super fun background of that. I'm sure you're all aware of it, so I won't bore you unless you want to be. But the point system has to exist. Our recommendation is that you implement a more simplified point system to say, can we be pointing on the fly as we go? So pointing refers to, particularly when it comes to veteran status, so that's a very important compliance piece that has to be honored, and that it's high risk to not do it, but there are ways to do it. So for example, in AppleTrack, when somebody applies, it's the candidate's responsibility to prove that they're a veteran. So you don't actually get veteran points unless you provide documentation that actually shows you're a veteran. And I will tell you that in our experience, many candidates don't bother applying that information because it doesn't affect them. They're saying, hey, I'm already in the candidate pool. I know I'm going to be interviewed, whatever it might be. But you can provide that opportunity for them to provide that on the AppleTrack system to make life easier. It's captured right there. We also think that having a simplified point system will allow you to have more consistency. So as Leah said, we didn't do a deep dive and say, okay, let's look at the last 25 pointing interviews, right? Last 25 positions that have been pointed. But what I will tell you is that just through kind of normal conversation is that everybody's approaching pointing in a little bit different way because there isn't a standard, everybody gets pointed the exact same. So they're applying the system as intended, which is they're pointing based on the position. But we really advocate for a very simple pointing system. Things as simple as you've had experience in the job I'm hiring for. I'm going to give you 5 points, right? You're a veteran. I'm going to give you 5 points. You applied for a job. I'm going to give you 5 points, right? So you have experience, you have a good job history, right? So you have a degree, you have a certification, whatever it might be. But what the real, I think, magic button in the pointing recommendation is to be intentional about setting a point system for each position that's set once, and that same system is just used and it's replicated over time, right? So you're not, every time you interview, deciding what's the point system for this position. That the district would say, we have a catalog that says every position. So for this position, this is the pointing form. This is what you do. As you do the interview questions, you can point them right there, and it's right there, or it can be done at the application point. So just to really make it simplified, when we talk practically how you execute that, and all these things, there's 2 more recommendations I'm going to talk about, but all of these things, even if you had somebody who was solely focused on recruiting, even if you said, okay, Abdul, we'd like you to come in and fix all this for us, which we're not advocating for, it would still take time. And we would say, okay, where's the most painful point, right? Where are we getting the most jam up of candidates? Where are we having the most frustrations when candidates are in the system? Or where's the most frustration from either the administrative team, the board, or the managers related to a certain process? And pick one at a time and be really strategic about how we eventually you move through that. It's just very painful to do it all at once. And really, particularly as Leah said, we work with a lot of public and government and school districts, and everybody's doing multiple jobs. So in our experience, nobody has the bandwidth to kind of do that in one fell swoop. So I would say for all of those previous 5 recommendations or 4, to do those based on pain points. Where is the pain? What's the frustration? How can we improve the process? Or what are just easy fixes? Things like Appltracks that are just an HRIS system, you can do those as you go, but otherwise focus on pain points. Our last 2 recommendations are, the last one's related to the transient and temporary pool. So one of the things that we know is that school districts have to have, we call them transient. So somebody who I'd say is a transient worker is, I'm a mom of elementary school age children, right? So when I have to go work the food truck at the thing, I'm a transient worker, right? So that's somebody who, I'm not looking for employment. I'm not looking to be employed long-term. I don't want that to transition into anything else. I'm essentially helping to meet a need of the actual district versus meeting a need for me. That's what we would look at as transient workers. And I think right now there are a lot of pain points around that and how that works and how do you do that in a way that works for the district, in a way that works for the person who's filling that role and meets the needs of the scheduling. So our recommendation there is twofold. One is not related to recruitment and selection. It would be just advocating for as many volunteers as you can in that role as possible. I think different districts, we've seen it done hundreds of different ways, but volunteers kind of remove that requirement for it, and so that can help a lot. The other recommendation is that you do something called essentially a hiring pool. So at the beginning of every year, you say, hey, any parents, any adults, anybody who's interested in ever helping us fill in for these transient positions, such as concessions, ticket takers, those are the only 2 that are on the top of my head right now, but anything like that, that they can be applied in a pool when it's not in the moment of need. And then whoever has a resource in that area says, oh, I've got a pool of people I can pull from that are already in the system. So you're not trying to real quickly on the side say, fill this out, and then how do I get this done? And it's just very stressful for everybody. So, and the last, but certainly not least, because I work in human resources, is just ongoing training to help people understand, hey, why are the things that we're changing, right? So if the board agrees to implement this and this is the direction that you go, to say, hey, here's why it's changing, here's how it's going to change, and here's how we're going to do it with a strategy, and we're going to pick the pain points, here's how we're going to determine that, and ongoing training related to those. Those are my big summaries. Again, that's kind of a narrative of the 11 pages. Both Leah, who is obviously involved in the strategic section, Myself, Tamara, who was highly involved in reviewing the processes, the policies, all of the union agreements. So we looked at the amount of stuff we read. It was a lot. It was like a library. We are happy to answer any questions or take feedback or whatever would be helpful for you all.
Questions, comments?
Thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of information. I'm sure you had a lot to read through, it sounds
Well,
like.
I was like, how do I summarize 11 pages briefly? So,
You did
I
well.
think you brought up some really good points though about, different point systems for different positions.
Yeah.
I can see a lot of value in that, and I didn't know we didn't have it.
yeah,
But until somebody can kind of come in from the outside and say, you don't need this, why are you doing that? And we didn't even have time to think about it.
yeah.
We're so busy,
Yeah,
so I think that this will be helpful.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah, Arlen.
I think a lot of it sounds good, but yet not everybody's technology proficient. Is that a good way to put it?
absolutely, yeah.
And I guess I would hope that in teaching positions, they probably were, but I mean, when I see this, use Apple Track every time we got a position, whatever happened to the good old fashioned day, you come into the district office, say, I want a job, you fill out 1 or 2 pages, what do you got, hanging on to something like that. Some of this has gotten so complicated that people aren't coming in the door because there's not a simple way that, I don't wanna do that, I just wanna make a phone call, or I wanna show up and I wanna fill out an application. And I haven't heard you say that.
Oh, yes, that's 100% what removing barriers to application is. So if I could high five you, if it wasn't COVID, I would high five you. I'll air high five, and I tell my kids, and like give elbows, right? So I completely agree with you. So by removing the barriers, so I'm glad you asked that so I can clarify. I apologize if I wasn't thorough on that. Removing barriers to application is exactly that. If you walk into a Home Depot right now and you want a job, they no longer are like, go sit at the kiosk. They're like, great, come back and sit with me. Let me talk to you right now. I'll do whatever you want to have an interview with you. And while we're talking, here's a paper application. Let's get the information. Or a lot of times we'll say, great, come on in, let's have an interview. And we'll help you get set up in the system as we get the job offer going. So how it gets into AppleTracks when it comes to the application is very important because of the EEO reporting that you're required to participate in. So things have to be in AppleTracks. That's a compliance piece. But how they get into AppleTracks makes never mind, right? So the position has to be posted in there, so that kind of has to stay the same. But absolutely, if there is a paper version of an application that can be available for somebody to walk in who says, like my mom is technology averse, she has zero interest in it, it makes her cry, she gets frustrated in calls, and so she would be that person who says, I'm not interested in doing that, so you could do that with paper.
That's fine, I just see so much of this going on, I hear from people. I got an insurance question, well, it's all online, you'll do that. Nobody's willing to hold the hand of the employee once they're here and say, this is where you will find it, it's easy to do, it's all there, just go here and goodbye. And that attitude has got to change, in my opinion. One of the other things I heard you talk about paraprofessionals being temporary.
No, seasonal, not necessarily.
Seasonal, they maybe don't work 12 months a year, but I think your classification on that, the way they are being done in our district, is actually a little bit insulting to some of them. And my wife's a paraprofessional, that's why I take it very seriously. I know a lot of what's going on in her situation, what they're expected to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think we have an issue where we're putting a double standard on our employees that some people aren't feeling welcome because they're not part of the teachers or the other group. And that's out there, I think.
Yeah, I think I would certainly look at those things. Well, one, I want to say, I think anybody who works in a school district, I think a lunchroom attendant, I think a nurse, I think the administrative offices, the secretaries, the bus, I would agree with you. Anybody who's in a school is serving a need, just like anybody in the healthcare industry, I think 100%. So I think what's important, and again, I'm glad that you asked, we can clarify it, is that when we say classification, it's only about what the status of that role and position is, not the value they bring to the district. So, for example, I'll use a lifeguard as an example because I think that's an easier one. So a lifeguard is a critical role that it plays in the district, right? So you cannot have a pool that opens without a lifeguard, and without that, you would have actual loss of life, right? So that lifeguard plays a critical role, but it still is a seasonal position in that the pool is only open for a certain period of time. So when we look at classifications, it's not about, I hear what you're saying and I can feel that, and I get it. It's just not about the value it brings. And a paraprofessional could end up in your district being a full-time regular or part-time regular position. So a part of the process from here would be if the board and the district agrees and says, hey, we actually like these recommendations, we'd like to move forward. Part of that process would be an actual review of all the positions that says which ones would we be considered regular, which ones would be considered seasonal, which would be temporary and transient. So to your point, a paraprofessional in your district may end up being a regular part-time or regular 0.75. Does that make sense?
Well, they're contracted, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just to tack onto that, the differentiation in the discussion or in the recommendations we're making really only applies to what are the differences in how you're recruiting and selecting and bringing in those candidates. And so just as Brenna said, it's not meant to assign any sort of value or hierarchy to those positions in any way.
Amy had her hand up. Yeah. Arlen, to your point, I just want you to know that we do make accommodations for people who request them. If they want help with the application process, if they want a paper application, we know we're meeting a lot of different people at different times in their life and different abilities. So that is something that we do accommodate. And what I can do is I can put that on postings. If you request an accommodation, a paper form, please. And that's something I can do.
I think that would go a long ways.
Okay, I can certainly do that. And everybody gets treated the same that gets onboarded. Everybody gets the exact same welcome email with all their information on it. And the benefits, I hope that's not what people are saying. I am happy and I meet all the time with new hires, retirees in my office, one-on-one, answering questions. I do point them to that information and then make myself available if they still have questions. So I just wanted to clarify that also. But I like that you brought up the paper application, and I can certainly add that to the postings going forward. We've talked about having a computer in the office available so that anybody that comes in, there's a Chromebook. And we have a table that's actually set up with a chair. We just COVID hit and that kind of all went by the wayside, but we do want to make a public kind of Chromebook available to those who want to come in that may need assistance filling out an application. Thank you. Other comments, questions?
Yeah, so the board needs to approve the changes in this process in terms of putting it in the book for policy on hiring and all of this?
Well, it sounds like the next steps would be to adopt your recommendations. Is that correct?
Yes, so based on, and Carson, I'll let you jump in here on, maybe that's out of my bucket, but when we spoke with Carson, he said the next step would be ultimately the board would see that before there was any adoption of any policy. And so that would maybe be a little bit more on I'll let the experts on you answer that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that, Carson?
Sure. And my thinking is that unless there are some objections to some of the materials, that we would kind of codify the suggestions into our handbook. And so it's more than just saying, yes, we're going to do it. I think we need to really get down to the details so we can exactly see what it is. So the board will approve it. It's just a matter of when.
Wonderful. Other comments? Anything else from Jackie or Amy or? No?
Just want to thank AEM for walking us through this. It's been really helpful. So, kudos.
I love it. I'm in the right job because we get all excited. We're like, ooh, policies, people.
Wonderful, we
Oh,
appreciate.
did you have something?
Yeah, I do. I just want to say thank you too for coming. I think we've heard for some time, some different things going on that having an outside group look at it to bring forward how we can, well, if it needs to be made better or make changes to make it where we attract people here to come to our district. You know, we're down here in Red Wing, you're like in Mankato.
Yeah.
Unless you're in the city.
On the Twin Cities, yeah, yep.
But your other office is Mankato. Not everybody wants to drive 45, 50 minutes, 60 minutes away from the bigger Rochester metropolitan area, so having something down here to simplify and get things, people interested in coming down here. If we can start at the beginning,
yeah,
we won't lose people, and we can have a better pool to, not a better pool, but a bigger pool to select.
Yeah, I agree, Jim. And I think one of the things that we have seen, because we work with a lot of clients who are outside of the greater Twin Cities area, and what we hear universally is if we wait at all on a candidate in a process, they're gone. They've been offered 3 other jobs. And so we're really focused on even really compliance policies if they result in losing candidates and not our ability. So we were just working with a client who they said, okay, we're gonna post a job, we're gonna leave it posted for 2 weeks, and then we'll review the candidates and we'll agree with our governing board, it was a private company, our governing board on who's gonna interview, and then we'll set the interviews with 3 people. And I was like, just don't post. I was like, just hire a temp. I was like, you're never gonna hire anybody. You need to post it and have somebody watch that every day and interview every candidate that comes in that's qualified and be prepared to make an offer or say, can you come back tomorrow? And so I think adapting and saying, hey, we'd love to do in-person interviews, but you're a great candidate. We want to interview you tomorrow, and 2 of the people can't get there, so they're going to be remote and you're going to be in whatever it might be. So just, you're spot on that it requires a lot of removing barriers, and once they're in the applicant pool, going quickly. You're spot on, Jim. Yeah.
You're right, just because you're right, you can go down any road, any town, and see help wanted signs up forever, and they're just in the door of the Target.
Target's $20 in my neighborhood right now.
And those other ones.
Yeah.
And realistically, you're looking $20, those look over, this full time is just over $40,000 a year.
Right.
You got a house, car, insurance, rent, whatever, house or rent, so $40,000 is a ton of money, or a lot of money, but some areas it's not.
Yeah, right, yeah.
What I was gonna say is, in your report, you talked about kind of the checks and balances, like making sure that we have something in our system so that once a year we're reviewing our policies and making sure we're doing what we said we're gonna do. So, I think I really appreciated hearing that, because I think you want to be able to look and say, our practices actually aren't exactly like that. So we either need to change our practices or change the policies to match.
Right.
And we need to do that on a regular basis so that we're not out of compliance for too long.
Right.
Like, we want to make sure that we've got a regular system in place. So how that plays out, we'll let you folks figure that out. But, as a board, I would expect that those checks and balances, the matching of what our policies are and what our procedures are going to mesh. And I think, however we can support you as a board to be able to do that, I think that's what we'd be looking for from the board level.
That's perfect. And I think a great way of doing that, we see as a best practice, is when we find that even our own internal processes, for example, with Leah and Tamara and I, if we have a process and we look back and we're like, we didn't follow it, we'll try to kind of take a stop, drop, and roll approach to be like, okay, did we not follow it because the process is broken, or because I didn't, what is the reason So if we have a process in place and we aren't following it, do we need to change the process, or is it accountability, right? I don't think there's always a universal answer to that. And so I think, a great time to do that is the annual EEO reporting, because you're already kind of doing reporting. It's a great built-in time to do that. And I think focusing on those trainings as well, to say, hey, let's get those questions bubbled up when there's a time and a challenge.
Great. Good. Any last thoughts?
Yeah, thank
Well-
you to all three presenters tonight. It was a really worthwhile process, so we appreciate your time and presentation.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the opportunity, and hopefully you leave tonight feeling like there's, I think overall the findings of the assessment were really that you have a lot of opportunity to make some very good changes that I think you'll start seeing quick wins. So that should be the key takeaway. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. Yeah, pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for traveling here.
Yes, next time I'll bring better props. I feel like she's got a real nut guy over here.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you all. And as much enjoyable as this is, I will take my hour-and-a-half drive home.
Watch for deer.
Yeah, exactly, right? Thank you all. Pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Well, next on our agenda is staff development and curriculum, Jess Wigholm, and then
Wait a minute.
we have a whole room full of fun guests.
No, now that
So glad to
everyone's
see you all.
mad at me.
They're all gonna speak for half an hour.
No. 8:30.
All right.
So I'll turn it over to you, Jess. Welcome.
Y'all need some of these?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Do you want to take a minute, Pam?
No.
Okay.
I think we should keep going.
Okay. All right. So we just have a couple of things to give out here. Everybody gets one of these. Here. Woohoo! Okay, so kind of the structure to this is gonna be, I'm gonna give a little background, so we'll do like half the times staff development and half the time curriculum. Stop at any point to ask questions. Kind of how we set it up is like, I'll give some background onto what we actually did, but because I didn't want to be, it's just sharing what happens in the district, because all of the people behind us obviously are the ones that make that run. And so when the presentation is going, we'll talk about what happened. I'll talk about what happened and what the background is for that part of the staff development, but then we'll get a little perspective from one of our administrators or our district implementation leads. So that's kind of how we're gonna set that up. So as we go, see here, gotta go this way. There we go. So as always, like our big plan is always looking towards the vision and the mission of Red Wing Public Schools. So whenever we're looking at that, how do we map out our 5-year plan for staff development? It still always comes back to the direction that the school board has given. So when we look, the outcomes for tonight, for you all, we hope to provide an overview of curriculum and an overview of the staff development big picture plan for these 5 years. And then near the end, we'll do the appointments for the staff development committee for this year. So this is it working? Okay. So it's like, that's not my thing. So with the overall teaching and learning plan, this was organized in 2018 or fall of 2019, where we set a direction for how are we going to implement this plan. And so when you look, even throughout the pandemic, we hit all of these different things. I would say where we hit a little bit of a stopgap was like fully implementing and aligning 7-12, because we kind of moved our focus down to E6 to then do 7-12 starting in this year and doing our review of
English and social studies for 7-12 this year. So we're a little bit behind, but we're really on track based on what we wanted to do for 2019. So when you look, this is like the high level staff development plan based on that implementation of our strategic plan. So when you look right away, it was kind of interviewing teachers, thinking about professional learning, giving an intro to the flight path journey, giving an intro to aligning curriculum, giving an intro to social emotional learning. The next year after that happened to have to be technology and training everybody in one-to-one, so we had to shift that. And then equity and building that in our leaders. And so that was, we'll talk about the Institute for Courageous Leadership, and then starting our equity work with Wing Huey and an overall all district staff development that started stepping into that for our teachers and our staff. And then also implementing, bless you, our new curriculum and doing that professional development to get that up and running as well. This year we are implementing a new teacher support based on some suggestions that and some of the reading that we've been doing. We're implementing a 5-to-1 new teacher support instead of a 1-to-1 mentor. We have 5 of our teachers mentoring 1 new teacher to see kind of, we're calling it a support squad. So we'll talk more about that because that was a big need in the district, and we heard that all around the onboarding and the support and how we do that. Equity, we're stepping into that a year 2 for some of our administrators and a year 1 institute for some other administrators. And then also some leadership coaching, Dare to Lead coaching, leadership coaching as well. We also have the overall coaching of teachers with our equity training as well. And as we keep going, as we implement these different categories based on our strategic directions, we obviously will continue to implement, but then that year 5 is really to improve what we're doing and to fill the holes that maybe come up from teachers and any of that feedback that we get as we go. So that's kind of the big picture. Questions on big picture, and then we're going to go into the details so you can not hear from me. You can hear from the people behind me. All right. So as we go, the first one, our Dare to Lead training was through Nicole Snenden. She is a Dare to Lead Brene Brown trainer who was trained by Brene Brown, and then she works as a innovative specialist in with Minnetonka School District. There are only 2 Dare to Lead trainers in Minnesota. One of them focuses on the counseling side of it, and then the other one, Nicole, focuses on the educational side. So we went with Nicole and contacted her, and she gave our K-6 admin a training in June, 7-12 admin in July, and then she will give that same follow-up training to our directors in October. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris Palmetier to talk any of your feedback about Dare to Lead or your love for Brene Brown.
Am I coming up here from here?
You can do whatever you would like.
Well, as Jess said, this summer we met with Nicole Sneden for a day. How many are familiar with Brene Brown? Just out of curiosity, okay. Those of you who are, let's see, I've been through a lot of leadership workshops. And I guess I'm gonna say some are great, some are not. I've appreciated this one. I think partly I've appreciated this one is the timing right now. I mean, I appreciate what you guys do. You guys are doing as a board what a lot of things nobody has ever done. Nobody has ever to consider. On a daily basis, I have to do the same thing, especially in the space that I'm working in right now. I have an entirely different staff. The people who are in my building, there are only 3 teachers that were there just 2 years ago. Okay, so that requires a couple of things from me. First off, one of the things, if you read Brene Brown, she talks about vulnerability. You know, vulnerability, and she keeps preaching the fact that it's not necessarily a weakness. But I have to tell you, in my role right now, kindergarten students, they're foreign to me. They truly are. I have to be, is it vulnerable enough to talk to my staff members? I have to go to one of my teachers and say, hey, I gotta ask you something here. This isn't what I've seen before. Or I'll talk to Mike Pagel, or I'll talk to Jen Groveman. that's been nothing but good as far as I'm concerned, growing as a professional, because these are still students, these are still members of our community. And I've said this to a lot of, and I've met some of you board members in this place too. I've enjoyed it. I really have enjoyed my experience, but again, there's a couple things that I need to grow, and one of them is vulnerability. And as I said that, making sure that we're attending to fear and feelings. My teachers come to me and they have questions about quarantining. I don't really have a frame of reference. You know, I have to go back, I have to appreciate their concern about that, their questions, and I have to get back as soon as I possibly can. Not that I didn't when I was a middle school principal, but there are things right now that are completely unknown to our staff and to our parents. I really have to be attuned to that, and I have to be present. I have to circle my building. I have to really know what that fear could be, and what their feelings might be about it too. And finally, Jess and I have talked about this too, staying curious. And I know that that's something that we don't generally talk about as leaders, but boy, in my last couple of years, and years before that too, it's an invaluable resource to use. And I hope my teachers and my staff find that I'm being genuine when I ask those questions too. And again, because it's all new, elementary principal, pandemic, there's a lot of different things. I found it to be a very useful tool. And I read parts and I reread them and I go, really? I have to read it, but it is, as I said, for those of you guys are also in a leadership position too, it's good. I really appreciate her perspective.
Thanks, Chris. Questions for Chris? We're on Dare to Lead.
No, but I'll just take this moment to say thank you for being vulnerable and for being willing, because it's been a challenge, and I know that we're all learning as we go, and so thank you for being honest about that and vulnerable, and I love that your comment about being curious, never leaving that off the table, because that's how we learn and grow, so thank you, Chris.
All right. Next, I don't know with our timing now. I think there are a lot of different videos in here. I kind of think with our timing, I'll maybe skip some of those. But that link there, in case you do have an opportunity, is directly from Dr. Shiraki Holly giving his workshop to our staff. And so that would be, we started the year with an all district staff kickoff. We had planned for it to be at Treasure Island with all 600 staff looking at each other. But with COVID, we thought that was not the responsible thing to do. So we had him in Hub to Hall, and that high school staff was in the space with him, and then we streamed to all the other buildings. So it's not exactly what we wanted, but we made it work. And his message really is to validate to really use his acronym. He has validate, affirm, build, and bridge. And that's the handout that you have in front of you too. That packet is from Shiraki Holly. And those were just some resources that he kind of went through with all of our staff. And what I appreciated most about what he did is he connected to every single staff member. And some of the feedback that we got from all staff was that they felt very included in what the conversation that was happening at the district. So we got a lot of feedback about, thank you for including them. In January, he will come back and we will hopefully be able to use our Treasure Island at that point. And that will be for all teachers and paraprofessionals at that January 17th. So George, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, I'll just speak to this. I know our staff at the high school felt really great about the training that we had on the 31st of August with Dr. Holly. I've actually worked with Dr. Holly before when I was in Rochester, and what he brings is a very transformational style. And what's nice about it is that he brings the opportunity for growth by reflecting on what you believe in culturally, and really challenging our cultural beliefs and being responsive to the cultures within our schools. And I think that's it gives you a different perspective, and that's why I think he's so popular with the educators because they're looking for something. You know, our people are looking for, you know, a way to, you know, connect with kids. And he brings so many different strategies to the table. And I think that's really the key. It's not just about, it's not just words, he's bringing action to it as well. That's the beauty of it. So I was really excited when we were able to get him to take our district on for some trainings because he doesn't do it for everybody. We had to convince him, and he was very willing to come our way, and I think he sees a lot of potential in Red Wing. So that was really kind of neat too. So.
Well, I'll give a shout out to George because he won't say it, but having him and Isaac Matzik be able to be a part of the first conversation with Dr. Shiraki Holly, you could tell like he wasn't maybe going to take us on as a district, but then hearing that George and Isaac had actually worked with him before, he kind of, you could see like, okay, you guys know what I'm about, you'll work with me, you'll go. And so then the plan is that in January, we will do the kickoff and then we will do some coaching for at each of our sites. We're hoping to do 10 to 20 teachers per site that his staff will come in and coach. So that's something.
Good.
Questions on that one?
Good to hear.
I know that board members were invited, sorry, were you gonna say something?
I will let you go.
Okay. I know board members were invited, wasn't able to go because I had to work, but, are board members invited to the January 17th?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I saw Nikki there. I didn't know if anybody else that was able to go.
It would be nice to know that there was a change and everything else, so we maybe could have gone. Nobody informed us where to go while they're in the Treasure Island deal, and nothing happened afterwards. And that's on me that I didn't go ask afterwards, but.
Okay, yep, that's good feedback. If anything changes, we can update on that for the January 17th. All right. Any other questions?
I was just gonna say, just being at that high school, I've heard a lot of great feedback from staff there about the experiences they had and that it was meaningful and that they had real tangible things that they could go back and do immediately. So they appreciated that.
Yeah, I enjoyed that about him as well. And he has humor in there, right? He makes it accessible for everybody too. All right.
What's the time you're doing that day and where's it at? Where are those 17th, you're doing those things at? Have you got that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
January 17th, that'll be in the morning at Treasure Island, as long as COVID cooperates with us.
Like 8 o'clock?
Yep. Yep, that he will be in 8 to 11 again. And then also during the kickoff week, we had our K-6 teachers and administrators be able to have Sam Oak. He also was streamed in based on COVID, but then because he was so excited to come and see Dr. Shiraki Holly, he actually asked if we could trade that. He's like, I'll do this training if you let me come see Dr. Holly. So he has done some recorded training, but then the next we will do for 7-12 during staff meetings, because I know George is looking to do a little bit more professional development during staff meetings. So Sam is going to start the October. We'll start with him. Hopefully he can come in person for us and kick that off for 7-12 so that everybody's having that same training. But Sam Oak, kind of what he gives us, this is directly from his presentation. If you guys don't mind, this one's kind of short. So I'll just give you a little taste of what our teachers got and what we are kind of diving into as some professional development from him, because this is one of 3. So he will do this and already did this for K-6. He'll do it for 7-12, and we'll have 2 more throughout the year that Sam will come back and do for us. Oh, that didn't work.
New research from the fields of neuroscience and social psychology has shed light onto the concept of unconscious bias. But what exactly is unconscious bias, and how does it affect our behaviors and decisions? Unconscious biases are simply our unintended people preferences. They are formed by our socialization, our personal experiences, and the representations of different groups in the media. These experiences act as social filters in which we make assessments and judgments of people around us. Research tells us that human beings have a natural tendency to place individuals into social categories. These categories are often based on visual cues such as gender, cultural background, age, height, or body size. We also categorize based on social background, job roles, religious identity, or political affiliation. The unconscious brain uses associations based on social categories to develop biases. For example, if we are constantly exposed to women as primary school teachers or receptionists, or men as plumbers and organizational leaders, these associations become wired within the human brain. The unconscious brain uses social categories to make unconscious judgments about people who are similar to us and people who are different from us. A common form of unconscious bias is affinity bias. This type of bias impacts talent processes in organizational decision-making, including how we recruit. Managers are more likely to hire people who look similar or with sounding names to them. Work allocation. Managers are more likely to assign key client projects to individuals within their teams who they have an unconscious affinity with. Performance. Where there is some kind of affinity, managers are more likely to spend time informally discussing positive contributions to the team and will focus on development and future work plans. For those where there is little affinity, managers are more likely to question past performance. The conversation will be less friendly and even hostile at times. Unconscious bias often results in a set of micro-behaviors. Examples of positive micro-behaviors include supporting the ideas of someone with who you have an unconscious affinity whilst in a team meeting, or simply wanting to have coffee with someone like you. Examples of negative micro-behaviors include checking emails on your phone whilst talking to a colleague, or cutting someone off in a meeting. Often our intention is not to make biased decisions, and through a focus on conscious thinking, and by creating inclusive work cultures, we can learn to control our unconscious judgments and mitigate the impact of bias on our talent programs. For more information on the nature of unconscious bias and how to mitigate its effects, contact ENEI.
So some of that discussion that we have pairs really nicely with Dr. Holly's work, where he says, kind of talking about implicit bias and unconscious bias, he says it can be your first thought, let's not let it be your last. And how do we like work and give strategies, very tangible strategies to that. So that's some of the work that he does. He also talks about the cycle of socialization, what they're referencing there, and how we grew up is not necessarily that you're judging how someone else grew up, but I have the lens of how I grew up, and our unconscious bias automatically feels like those references are going to be something that everybody understands because that's how we connect to the world. So it's just like studying how that affects how we might teach or how we might interact with our colleagues or different things like that. And what are some tools that we can use to work towards leveling that playing field in our schools. I won't show this one, but Sam, I'm not going to play that video, but Sam, who did I sign up? Jen. So Jen Grove also had an emergency tonight, but she was going to talk about the impact of Sam Oak's work on K-6. Mike or Chris, did you want to say anything about Sam Oak? You don't need to, but you wanted to.
No, I mean, I think we've kind of hit on that.
Okay. Perfect. All right.
Well, I mean, it was well received by staff. Definitely.
And I'm hoping we can get them in person because that's always better. Always better.
Yep.
Okay, so the next thing would be to talk about this leadership, this Institute for Courageous School and District Leaders. This is about 8 times a year. It was year 1, and Candace Radskin and Melissa Kroll was the past superintendent of Eden Prairie Public Schools and then the past superintendent of Austin Public Schools. And they run this institute in order to kind of have these discussions in a smaller group. We had 10 administrators go for year 1 and then 3 starting for year 2.
So if you wanted to explore more, this is a link to their website down here. So I won't need to bring that up. But some of the stuff that we did for year one was read White Fragility, and they kind of led us through those discussions as an admin team. For year two, we'll be doing Ibram Kendi's book, and then Principal Leadership for Racial Equity. So these two, they'll walk us through for this year. And then there's another one that I'm participating in that is with school districts across Minnesota. And we'll be reading this book this year, and it's been really interesting. There's about 70 different school districts represented, and it's been really great to compare what they're doing to what we're doing and really learning and taking in a lot of the strategies that they're utilizing. St. Paul Public Schools is in there too, and it's really great to see how larger school districts are enacting some of these, and it's actually probably a little bit slower for them because of what they have to do. So that's interesting that we can probably turn our ship a little bit more quickly. So I did want to ask Mike and Mick to talk, and I don't know who goes first.
Thank you, sir. Sure. So it was great to just get together with a team of people and kind of discuss, and to Chris's point about just being vulnerable, just having that space where we can kind of ask questions and dial into some difficult conversations, and just some difficult statistics to look at and to kind of humble ourselves on the inequities within our educational system. So it's just kind of great to go through a well-written book that just engaged some good dialogue, and then also for us to put together some action steps and some plans for how we could address the inequities in front of us. So looking forward for more conversations this year in year two, and kind of next steps that we'll have.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, I don't generally find staring at a screen terribly engaging, but I will say every one of the meetings we had last year was everybody was super engaged. Some great conversations. I don't think once we ever got through our full agenda because of the conversations that we had. And I thought Candace and Melissa did a really nice job of really couching what systemic racism looks like, what it is and what it isn't. And I found that really helpful just from a grounding standpoint to really sort of go, oh, okay, I see what we're talking about here. Like, okay, this is actionable. There are little things. I think sometimes we talk about systemic things, it's big and it's up here. And I thought they did a really nice job. They gave us kind of some tasks to do, which it sounds like tomorrow in our first one, we're kind of revisiting where we set some things within our own realm of influence that we thought, you know what, maybe we need to take another look at that. And maybe that's not very equitable. And so I found it terribly useful, and I'm looking forward to getting going again.
Yeah. Thank you. How long is that, Emily? 3 minutes?
Is it like 2 minutes, 40 seconds, something like that?
So I'm super excited about Calm Classroom. This is a resource that we got, so it kind of is bridging the curriculum and our professional development. We did have to give some professional development to put this resource in, but we did get it from through a partnership with Goodhue County Health and Human Services, and they had asked us to kind of pilot this a couple of years ago, and we were in conversation with it, and then COVID hit, and we went, let's pause, and then we came back around because it's needed more than ever right now, and so we can give a little feedback to it, but I think it's important so you guys understand what this resource is. We have about 200 teachers. What are we at, Emily?
136 have signed up.
This is an opt-in program. The teachers, because they found that the research to it, if you force this on your teachers and they do it in a sarcastic way, the research doesn't hold. And so this is something that they did not have to do. And we had a ton of teachers at the high school sign up almost immediately, I think because they saw the need here.
Yeah, and depending on the age level, like the high school, it's
Please join me to do seated mounted, our Calm Classroom strategy for this one. Feel your feet flat on the floor. Sit up straight and comfortably. Rest your hands on your lap. Relax your shoulders. Close your eyes. Let your whole body be still.
As we create a community in our classroom, trying to have a space where we can trust each other and where we care about each other. And Calm Classroom has given us specific tools, specific words, and they use it all the time and they love it. And it's been so helpful. And they're also very generous in helping remind me when I need reminders also.
I feel like the world would have been like more calm and we wouldn't have this much as violence, and like how people would stay positive instead of negative, because there's a lot of violence in the world. So in my opinion, I think if we do Calm Classroom and we teach others, they might be calm and not do other stuff that might harm people.
I have been an educator now for 18 years. 2, 3, hold. And all the time, they're saying, thank you, Ms. Stone. Thank you for helping me get in control of my anger. And I'm a science teacher. I've never seen that before. So it's been a pleasure to meet Calm Classroom. Does anyone want to share how they feel?
Calm Classroom, it like helps because sometimes you're like get really stressed or angry or can't focus, and then you just pull out one of the activities and then you're able to just like calm down and focus.
It made like all my negative thoughts and feelings like melt away.
And it does help because before this I was always very upset and I used to just take my anger out on people, and then I used to always get in trouble. So yeah, but now that's not really happening that much anymore.
Thanks, Benji.
Just due to time, but it's a mindfulness activity, and Emily, sorry I cut you off, go ahead.
Oh, I would say it doesn't take a lot of time, so it's either 2 3-minute strategies a day or you do it 3 times, so it's either 6 or 9 minutes a day, depending on the age level. And I will say, I was actually in a classroom today where they were talking about what can we do when we feel this way, and one of the kids, we're 14 days in, starts pulling out, and he's like, we can do this, and starts doing the strategy. So it's been cool today when I saw that.
I've also heard of teachers doing that same thing where they forgot to do it, and the students are like, we didn't do our mindfulness thing yet. So they're catching on to it and seeing it part of the routine and wanting it.
No, who's doing this in the high school?
It's actually E12, and we ran out of,
E12?
yeah, we ran out of early childhood ones. We had to reorder for early childhood, and yeah, it's all the way up. We have
This year or last year?
This is new this
Be
year.
interesting to see after first semester if it's helped with any behavioral issues that you deal with or have dealt with. See how that comes down or not. So not that it should stop. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Let us know in January what or February if you've seen that, because you know who's anger usually is one of the causes of discipline. I like it.
All right. Any other questions on Calm Classroom? We can start each
Holly right
school
here, so
board
let's
minute.
start right now. Next
So the next thing that we wanted to talk about was our paraprofessional training, which during workshop week, they were a part of the overall district day, but then we also had a paraprofessional day where they were in Hub to Hall with us for Marcia, Emily, and I for this. The reason I'm pulling this up is this is kind of the schedule that we had right here. And what we did with that, actually, I have to switch tabs, share this tab instead. There we go. So what I highlighted there would be their schedule. And what we did is throughout, we kind of talked about, Marcia talked about the why, the overall why, and why are you here, and kind of regrounding us in that. And then we went through the higher level educational plan and kind of the vision and mission that you all have set. That's something that I got a lot of feedback about, was like, oh, that's why you ask us to do it this way. It like fits in that overall big plan. And that was a really great to hear. And Marcia, I'll let you talk about some of the feedback as well.
Yeah, so I had the opportunity to get some information about what paraprofessionals had felt about training before and what they were looking for. And so I haven't been here all that long yet, but it was nice that I had some information to work with, and then was able to bring that to Jess in the planning for that second day when we have them. And so we were able to hit on all the areas that were brought up in those conversations on that day. And so one of the things we heard from more than one person, and it felt really good, to be honest with you, is that this was the best training we have had. We feel included. It connected to the day before, like when we were getting, when there were like turn and talk activities throughout the day, things like bringing up how that first thought in your head doesn't have to be the thought that you respond on. And that was from Shrek Collie, talking about outrageous love. We were able to differentiate in the day so that paraprofessionals were getting what they needed based on the population of students they were working with. So Brittany had a creative curriculum in her building. So the Cobble Paras, we had it scheduled out. Cobble Paras left and went to Cobble to be part of that. The K-6 Paras stayed and were part of learning about K-6 PBIS with Emily. And our secondary paraprofessionals went with George and Jason and learned about some exciting things that were happening at the high school and just getting updates. So it was really nice that everybody was getting something that they needed that was relevant to them. And we still covered like the required content that we had to go through. It was exciting. I know that it's late and I probably shouldn't keep talking, but they've asked for more time with Emily. Many of the paras have. And so the special education paras, they get 2 hours a month extra that they can time card, and they can use that for some data things that they need to do, meeting with case managers to talk about students, but also principals schedule time to meet with them. And so Emily and I talked, and I talked to some, I haven't gotten to all the principals yet, but could Emily be part of that? So that they're getting more of the common classroom and understanding that and those PBIS strategies, because they really want to be part of that. And so my challenge too is how do we get the Gen Ed paras engaged in that same thing, because they don't get those 2 hours extra. And so that is something that I'm working through, but it was really exciting. It was a great day according to them.
So, as a transition here, with the new teacher, sorry, any questions on the paraprofessional training? Okay. So the new teacher support, the 5-to-1, we will also have monthly meetings instead of keeping it at the beginning of the year and doing like an intensive at the beginning of the year. We did that, but then we'll also transition to doing monthly meetings that will be focused on, based on George's and Jay have done a lot with John Hattie, and also the K-6 principals have talked about putting his mindsets in. So that'll be kind of the gauge, and how we will organize each of the months is going through one of each mindset, which if we want more information on that, we can probably spend a workshop on John Hattie. But I've heard a lot of great feedback, not only just about from the mentees, but also the idea from a high school teacher that says like, wait, I'm a high school teacher, why am I on a support squad for an elementary school teacher? And then when we explain it, they're like, oh my God, I love that idea. So it's kind of like building that community amongst the buildings, so that that is something that we've gotten some good feedback on from teachers as well. But it was a great idea when we had less new teachers, but now that we're hiring a bunch of new teachers, that's 85 support squad members. So that's a lot of teachers that have stood up and said, I'm willing to do it, which is really awesome too. All right, now so with Emily and Mick and Tony, and I'm sorry, Tony, I didn't okay this picture of you, but this is what showed up on Google of you, so I thought that was funny for our tech guy. It's delayed, sorry, it'll come up. There's Tony. But for that, the differentiated staff development will be in the form of coaching. Through Emily, it will be coaching with PBIS and instructional practices that surround PBIS. And we actually are talking about, we thought she could maybe be E12, but when we looked at her time capacity, she will support district-wide PBIS strategies, but the coaching will really need to focus K6 because we lost that extra position that just with time management and being able to do that effectively, we kind of talked about that obviously she would still support the PBIS leads in each building, but that the coaching would start with K6 and then hoping to maybe expand that when we get the other one under control. Mick would be going through with really pulling down our flight path journey into, and he just sent something out to staff about how we would implement kind of career awareness into our E6, and you can talk a little bit about that. And Tony's coaching would come in the form of technology and making sure that everybody has what they need, differentiated at their level. So Emily, do you want to start?
Sure. And in addition to all of that Jeff said, we also started, I talked about this with the meeting in August, we started a self-assessment a month for new teachers, not new teachers, all teachers, and we did our first September one, and actually a great response considering it's like the first week of school, it's busy, and I'm like, hey, everybody, take the time to fill out this Google form. So each self-assessment is going to go along with what our monthly effective tier 1 practices. So this was just setting up the physical environment. Lots of research and importance of that. And based on the results of the self-assessments and teachers, it helps me guide what I give to staff newsletters, both at the elementary and the high school level, for what we call bite-sized PD. Teachers don't have time for me to give them pages upon pages upon pages. So we want to break it down in short little bites of information that's research-based that they can implement in their classroom, tied to what that effective tier 1 practices. And then also walkthroughs will be about that. Also, they'll get feedback from that, which is a little bit different than coaching.
For pulling flight paths journey down to the elementary levels, where there's an essential question tied to wingers on a 1 week or 2 week basis. And so what we're going to do is we're going to bring in just some career awareness at the same time. We have second graders that want to be Spider-Man, like all for it, like go for that still. But we might also talk about like there's a thing called an ornithologist. So when we're talking about like how baby animals move, we might throw in that at the same time. And then make sure that we're bringing that in visually so that however our kids identify, they're seeing themselves represented in those career areas as well. So even if that's not represented in our community, our students can see themselves in all different career paths, as well as see lots of different types of people in each career path at the same time too. So that'll be a new initiative that we'll be bringing in this year.
All right, I'll stand up because I can't really see everybody, but for those of you that don't know me, I'm Tony Kashi. This is my 11th year in the district. I've been a math teacher here for 10 years. And this year is my first time in the role of educational technology integrationist, and that is spread over the whole district. So basically my first task is making sure everybody has the Chromebook and all their subscriptions and their student rosters are loaded and they're able to access everything. And now my next step is really to help them integrate the technology in really the realm that they're comfortable with, right? Just like in teaching students, coaching staff, it's easy for me. I know a lot of high school staff of where they're at and what next step they need to. My challenge is to make sure that I'm reaching all the elementary school staff that I haven't maybe put a face to a name yet. And so that's where we're kind of rolling next. And really everybody has a time and a place that they like to meet. I'll be starting with a lot of the departments with PLCs at the high school, but being flexible, having a schedule flexible for both the morning and afternoon for the elementary school. I've been in all the schools so far, and I've learned it's a lot of, hey, while you're here, could you come in? And so those onesie twosies add up, but the schedule is going to be a lot more solidified and structured with, okay, where are you at, and how can we bring you to the next level? And obviously, there's some tools that we'll be kind of reviewing along the way too, on whether they're appropriate for everybody, or if there's things that we can consolidate into maybe a couple of subscriptions that everybody could benefit from too. So yeah.
Right, so this would have been where we had questions about staff development. I think we should possibly go here because I know that there have been some new resources that have gone in, but also our focus this year on curriculum is to support and improve the implementation of things that we already have. So there is support with the music curriculum. There's support with the Allison Rumka does not work for the district anymore, but she is on as a STEM coach. Writing a curriculum, so it's not as intensive as Emily, but like we tried to use some of our STEM funds, because the plan for STEM was that she was going to write the curriculum, and then she was no longer the kindergarten teacher. So Mike had the brilliant idea of asking her if she would like to write that curriculum, and she ended up like, yeah, that's what I love to do. So we're tapping into her as a resource, and also she is then coaching our teachers on how to implement it with those referendum dollars that we've allocated. And then the other thing that we implemented, and Brittany, I didn't put it up there, but if you wanted to say a couple of things about the creative curriculum, that might be a good.
Yeah, creative curriculum is the curriculum that the early childhood of our preschool went with, and actually we brought it all the way down to early childhood family ed too. The teachers have done it for a couple of weeks now. It's more of a inquiry-based curriculum, and I've heard really good feedback. They were a little nervous going into it, but just today they were all excited to tell me about the book of the week. It's really open enough for them to put in some of their own teacher creativity, but has a really nice structure, foundation kind of for teachers, anywhere from the literature to just little mighty minutes cards that are activities they can do while they're lining up for the day. So it's a really, really well-structured curriculum, and we're excited about it.
And then I would say the other implementation that's new this year, there's a new responsive advisory meeting that the 7th and 8th grade teachers are utilizing for advisory. And then we are utilizing Washika materials. It's spelled like Wasika, but Washika materials for our Title I classrooms to kind of go through. It's a Montessori material, but it goes through its Orton Gillingham research-based that go back in case that those kids need the extra support in learning those 44 sounds of the English language. And we're using that in our Title I classrooms to use something a little bit different when they're in there and be able to still support their growth. And did some training with our Title I paras. They were super excited to be implementing that, and we got a lot of good feedback. Emily was my pretend student as we walked through it, and she did a great job of not being cooperative, so that we could show how that actually works with the title paras. So that, I think, I would love to come back and talk more about curriculum, but I also know that you guys, it's 8:29, and I want to get you out of here on time. So if anybody has any questions.
Very good. I just have one question. Tony, what's your title, and can you say it 10 times? I think it's the point of
title. My first thing would be to change my title. Just due to the acronym ETI does not bode well with me. sounds like something you study in health class, so.
Have a good night, everybody. Thank you.
Right. Well, I know, gosh, it's been a long day. Thank you for sitting through all of this and for being here and sharing your expertise and what you've learned. And it never ceases to amaze me, the marvelous work and the great teamwork that is being done in this room. So thank you all for the work that you're doing and for being here tonight, because I know it's a long day and we missed out on the beautiful evening to be out there. So hopefully the sunshine will still be here later in the week, but.
You gotta schedule these when it's raining.
Yes, right? So with that,
75 degrees outside.
we'll end our formal meeting. It is 8:30.
What are
So
these
thank
for?
you.
Oh, yes, those are to hand out. Jennifer and Anna met with Karsten and I to talk about getting feedback, because based on some of the feedback you guys got, is that we would like it to be more accessible to give feedback and also be able to, like you said, Arlen, do it anonymously. And so you have that stack. The top has some in Spanish, the bottom are in English. And I can let Anna or Jennifer talk about their intent with them, but I believe it will be a nice way to engage with a community member if you don't have something, so you can say, we'd really love you to fill this out and give us any feedback. And they will come back to the district office and we will compile all of that information to then utilize for our World's Best Workforce plan and take any suggestions that people have and compile all that data.
Thank you.
Are these in all the buildings too, Jeff?
Nope, you guys have the first round of them. We have more. We didn't put the postage on all of them. Those ones are pre-postage, so.
Yeah, somebody did a lot, put postage on all of these.
So does the postage get used if these don't get mailed back?
No.
No, it's only when it goes through the meter
Right,
at the post office it gets charged.
right.
All right, break. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Karsten, are you still there? Don't hang up.
It's the
He's gone.
That's like the greatest thing ever.
Mhm.
I'm thinking we should probably just meet virtually.
I'm glad to see you there. Might have been on the train.